Hey guys, tonight we drift into a place where the ground feels older than anything you've ever stepped on, where the air carries dust from civilizations so ancient you'd need several spare lifetimes just to pronounce their names correctly. You're standing at the edge of a dim desert plain, and, for a second, you swear the sand under your feet begins to ripple, almost like it's remembering things. That's the mood tonight. We're slipping through time, brushing up against the Seven Wonders, and yes, you probably won't survive this if you try it in real life because human bodies aren't exactly built for 2,500-year detours. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. I love seeing the little constellation of late-night adventurers scattered across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take a slow breath and let the desert breeze slip past your ears. The horizon glows a muted gold, and one by one, colossal silhouettes emerge like half-remembered dreams. There's something uncanny about seeing all the ancient wonders standing together, even though they never did in real life. But imagination is generous, and tonight, it's staging its own lineup for you. The Great Pyramid cuts a perfect triangle against the sky. The hanging gardens shimmer with vines and waterfalls you can almost taste. Artemis's temple gleams under a curtain of flickering torchlight. You step forward, sand whispering under your feet. Each monument feels alive, humming softly, like they're waiting for you to come closer. You swallow, half expecting some ancient security guard maybe wearing a linen kilt and holding a torch to yell, "Hey, no touching the priceless structures." But no one stops you. This world is built for wandering. You squint as the pyramid comes into sharp focus, its limestone casing still intact, throwing shards of moonlight into your eyes. It's weirdly blinding, like whoever designed it had an obsession with reflective surfaces long before Instagram filters existed. One mainstream historical fact swims into your mind. The pyramid is the oldest of the Seven Wonders, completed around 2560 BCE, and somehow the only one still standing. You kind of want to pat it like an old, loyal dog that's outlived the entire neighborhood, but something tells you it doesn't appreciate casual affection. A gust of wind swirls around you, carrying a faint scent stone warmed all day, cooling at night. In the distance, the other wonders pulse faintly, as if they're aware of each other. You take a few steps, and the sand suddenly crunches in a way that makes you stop. You lean down and brush your fingers across a tiny, carved bead, half buried beneath your heel. A quirky tidbit circles in your mind. Ancient tourists. Yes, tourists used to take souvenirs from these places, just like people do today. Except instead of "I love Alexandria" keychains, they pocketed bits of temples. Humans have always been the same, apparently. You straighten up, brushing grit from your hands, and look again at the vast panorama. The scene is breathtaking, but there's something uneasy about it too. The wind carries a low groan one moment, then silence the next, almost like the earth is clearing its throat before telling a story that's too heavy for words. You step back, feeling the ground vibrate, and that's when the thought hits you. This beauty is temporary. It was always temporary, and historians still argue whether that temporariness was mostly fate, poor engineering, natural disaster, or human hands being, well, human. You drift forward again, and your vision shifts. Now, you're moving as though you're walking through time itself, a slow, syrupy slide from one century into another. The monuments flicker, reshaping as politics shift, empires rise, priests complain, kings brag, priests complain again, and the weather decides to get involved just to be dramatic. You watch the Temple of Artemis appear in pristine marble, then dim as distant fires blaze. You watch the lighthouse of Alexandria shine like a second sun, then stutter and crumble under an earthquake wave you can almost feel through your shoes. A soft chuckle escapes you, half nervous. "No wonder only one of these survived," you mumble. Your voice feels tiny compared to the weight of history swirling around you. This whole place reeks of ambition, stubbornness, and the eternal human urge to build things taller than the last guys. But it also reeks of reality storms, wars, neglect, accidental fires, oops, my candle fell over, flammability, and of course, that one emperor who thought melting down bronze statues was a fantastic business plan. Another breeze glides past, cooler this time, hinting that the night is deepening. You roll your shoulders, letting the softness of the moment settle into you. The sky overhead looks impossibly wide. Stars streak across it in a slow arc, like someone dragged a glittering brush along the darkness. You inhale, feeling your breath sink with the stillness. Even though you're surrounded by giants, you don't feel small. You feel oddly welcome. As though the ancient world is saying, "Come on in. We've been waiting for someone curious enough to ask what happened to us." Far off, the Colossus of Rhodes raises its bronze arm, catching moonlight against its impossible height. You tilt your head. Bronze looks surprisingly moisturized for something that's been dead for 2 millennia. You almost snort at the thought of an ancient Rhodesian influencer shouting, "Here's my secret to glowing metal skin crocodile dung sunscreen." You shake the joke off, but keep it tucked away. You know you'll need more humor later to balance the rising sense of awe. Still, beneath that humor, another sensation settles in. The kind that comes when you realize you're walking through the condensed memory of the human species, through pride, vanity, devotion, rivalry, and the universal urge to build something so spectacular that future generations whisper about it at bedtime. You keep walking. The sand pulls at your ankles, slow but steady, as if urging you forward. Nothing interrupts you. Nothing breaks the spell. And as you drift past the pyramid's shimmering slope, the beginnings of the next wonder beckon from the horizon. Vines swaying, water cascading in impossible terraces. You don't stop. You let the night carry you deeper into the maze of lost wonders. You keep drifting forward, letting the pyramid's glow fade behind you, though it never entirely disappears. It's like that one overachiever in every class who keeps raising its hand even when the teacher stopped asking questions. You glance back once, and yep, still there, towering, smug, practically whispering. Still standing, by the way. You roll your eyes and continue across the desert plain. The air shifts subtly, still warm, but with a bite of stone dust that settles on your tongue like powdered history. You blink, and suddenly you're right at the base of the Great Pyramid, its angled sides rising so steeply it feels like your neck's filing a workplace complaint. Up close, the structure isn't smooth or shimmering like you first saw. Your eyes adjust to a more honest texture, blocks the size of cars stacked with obsessive precision. You run a hand over one, feeling the faint grooves left by workers who lived 30 lifetimes before your great anything. A mainstream historical fact murmurs through your mind. The Great Pyramid originally had a polished limestone casing that reflected sunlight so brightly sailors reportedly used it as a landmark. You try to imagine that an enormous cosmic mirror blinding the neighbors every morning. No wonder it gained such a reputation. A little wind curls around your ankles, as if guiding you further. The pyramid radiates warmth from the day's sun, the stone almost comforting. You press your palm against it and instantly pull back. Too hot. Just burned my hand on an artifact older than writing, hot. You whisper a half laugh and think, yeah, no touching the giant oven-shaped wonder. But something else captures your attention, its sheer survival. You step back and look again. All around you, the other wonders shimmer like memories waiting for their tragic endings. But the pyramid stands firm, steady, annoyingly invincible. You wonder, briefly, if it's the kind of monument that uses moisturizers, or if this whole immortal vibe is just natural sandstone confidence. A fringe tidbit flits by. Some ancient writers claimed the pyramid's builders used a magical pyramid power to preserve objects stored within. Sure, that's not real science, but it adds a fun little sparkle to your surroundings. You walk around one corner, feet crunching on gravel that might have once been a worker's tool, or a chipped block, or knowing ancient Egypt a piece of someone's overly ornate eyeliner palette. Another fact floats up. Over 2 million stone blocks make up the Great Pyramid, and some weigh as much as 80 tons. 80 tons. You pause, imagining ancient laborers trying to move something heavier than your weekly emotional baggage. They somehow succeeded multiple times. You struggle to push a door marked pull. Life isn't fair. The desert wind strengthens just slightly, offering a brief break from the heat baked into the rock. You close your eyes, letting the breeze carry you into a thought you didn't expect. This is the only wonder that didn't disappear. And that makes you wonder what protected it. The location, the engineering, the ridiculous amount of effort poured into every angle. Historians still argue whether its survival was intentional, some grand design choice, or if fate just shrugged and decided to leave one wonder for future night wanderers like you. You walk a few steps more, and the pyramid seems to subtly shift in perspective, revealing its perfect alignment with the cardinal directions. North, south, east, west, each side nearly flawless. You raise your eyebrows. It's one thing to build an enormous tomb. It's another to align it so precisely that modern compasses feel insecure. Your breath hitches slightly, caught between reverence and that, wow, I really should have paid more attention in geometry class, regret. A sudden shadow moves, not a person, but something cast by the pyramid itself. It creeps across the sand in a long, slow stretch, almost pointing toward the horizon like a teacher nudging you forward. Go on. Class isn't over. You follow it, even though you half expect the shadow to wrap around your ankles and start lecturing about ancient funerary practices. You pause again, taking in the silence. There's a unique kind of quiet here, not empty, but full, as if the whole structure is inhaling and exhaling on a scale too large for humans to notice. You tilt your head and almost catch a rhythm. Not heartbeat, not wind, something else, something architectural. A joke drifts into your thoughts. Maybe it's just the pyramid internally, screaming every time tourists mispronounce Khufu. Still, beneath the sarcasm, you feel something deeper. This wonder is a survivor, because it was designed to be one. It wasn't here to impress for a season or a century. It was built to cheat time, to stubbornly exist long after every pharaoh's name was forgotten, every kingdom rewritten, every map redrawn. You step farther out, giving the pyramid space in your vision. A faint shimmer dances on its edges, rippling like heat waves but cooler somehow, like frost glitter. For a bizarre moment, you imagine the pyramid whispering, "It's not my fault the others didn't keep up." You snort, shake your head, and keep walking. The ground slopes gently downward, the sand loosening beneath your feet. The air thickens with a hint of greenery ahead, something you didn't expect in this desert of giants. You look back once more at the pyramid, glowing faintly under the night sky, a single eternal witness to a world of ruins. Then you turn your gaze forward, toward a place where vines sway, terraces rise, and waterfalls shimmer like illusions waiting to be tested. The hanging gardens call, and you answer without a word. You step away from the desert heat, and suddenly the air thickens not unpleasantly, but like someone switched environments on you without warning. The dryness lifts, replaced by moisture that clings to your skin the moment you enter the shadow of something impossibly green. You blink once, twice, and then there it is, Babylon, or at least the shimmering memory of it, blooming out of the night like the world's most extravagant houseplant. You trudge forward, sandals sinking into cool, damp soil that has absolutely no business existing this close to the desert you just walked through. The ground hums with flowing water beneath the surface, and the scent hits you wild mint, damp stone, and something floral you can't quite identify. Well, you whisper to yourself, someone definitely overwatered. Before you rises the hanging gardens, or the idea of them. Terraces stacked like giant, leafy wedding cakes stretch upward, dripping with vines that sway even though there's barely a breeze. Waterfalls cascade down each level in thin, luminous sheets, catching moonlight as if someone sprinkled glitter through the air just for dramatic effect. It's lush, chaotic, overgrown in the most curated way. Basically, it's the ancient world's version of, look how rich we are. You step closer, brushing your fingers along a massive fern-like leaf. It's cool, damp, and softer than you expected, almost velvety. A mainstream historical fact rises in your mind. If these gardens truly existed, they would have required one of the earliest known irrigation systems capable of hauling water up several stories, possibly using devices similar to the Archimedes screw long before Archimedes was even born. You imagine Babylonian engineers exhausting themselves just to keep this gigantic botanical flex alive. Someone definitely skipped leg day for this. You tilt your head back to take in the full height, and that's when you feel the first twinge of uncertainty. The gardens seem too perfect, too symmetrical, too cooperative. It almost feels like the landscape is trying to sell you on its own existence, which is hilarious, because there's a quirky tidbit that says no Babylonian texts actually mention the hanging gardens. Not one, zip, zero. For a wonder supposedly located in the heart of their city, you'd think someone would have bragged about it. Humans love bragging, some things never change. You wander through an arch woven from living vines, droplets falling on your hair as if the plants are greeting you. The temperature cools further, and your breath carries a faint mist. Water rushes somewhere above, trickling down channels carved with precision. You follow the sound, stepping onto a stone path slick with moss. The stones themselves glow with a faint bluish sheen, probably moonlight, though you can't help whispering, "Okay, but what if ancient Babylonians invented mood lighting?" You reach the first terrace and kneel beside a shallow pool feeding one of the waterfalls. The water's clear enough to see your reflection, though your face wavers every time a droplet disturbs the surface. You dip a finger in cool, refreshing, alarmingly clean for a system allegedly run thousands of years ago without filtration. You sip a drop off your fingertip, half expecting your doctor to burst in from the 21st century, shaking their head like, "We talked about ancient water safety, remember?" But the taste is pure, crisp, almost too perfect. A gentle tremor through the soil makes you pause. Not an earthquake, just subtle movement, like something mechanical shifting deep below the surface. You lean closer. Yes, something is rotating down there. You smile. Hydraulic flex, ancient edition. Still, questions linger. You walk deeper into the greenery, brushing past palm fronds, pushing aside flowering vines. The garden feels less like an archaeological site and more like a dream with stage lighting. Historians still argue whether the gardens existed in Babylon at all, or whether they were actually in Nineveh, misattributed for centuries thanks to geography, translation issues, and the ancient tradition of saying, "Close enough." You rest your hand on a pillar, overrun with ivy. Up close, it isn't quite right. The stone is smoother than it should be, the carvings too crisp. You squint. It's as if the place is actively editing itself to match whatever painting or description you happen to remember. You raise an eyebrow. "Okay, so you're self-conscious." Noted. A sudden cascade of petals rains down from above, triggered by a shift of wind, or maybe some ancient horticultural diva moment. White blossoms scatter across your shoulders. You brush them off with a chuckle. "All right, calm down. I get it. You're pretty." You keep climbing through the terraces, each level more absurdly lush than the last. Fruit trees droop with weight. Thick vines coil like serpents. Birds you don't recognize flicker between branches. You swear one of them has neon feathers, which is definitely not historically accurate, but the garden does what it wants. You aren't in a textbook. You're in a memory trying its best to be factual. It's here, at the top terrace, that everything clicks into place. The night opens up around you. Below, the terraces curve like green waves. Beyond them, Babylon stretches into the dark, a sprawling city of mud brick, towers, and torch-lit streets. The Euphrates glistens like a ribbon of liquid silver. It's beautiful. It's impossible. It's both. You sit on a stone bench, half covered in jasmine vines, and let the moment settle. Your fingertips trail over the carvings beside you, lions, reeds, lotus blossoms. The stone feels alive under your touch, vibrating faintly with the heartbeat of flowing water. You close your eyes, imagining the armies, the kings, the workers who might have stood here. Or maybe none of them ever did. Maybe this wonder only lives because people needed it to. Because some stories are too good to let go. You crack an eye open and catch a glimpse of motion in the shadow, something shifting, rearranging, as though the garden is preparing for its next visitor. You smile tiredly. Whether it ever existed physically, it definitely exists now, at least for. A vine uncurls nearby, brushing your ankle like a gentle suggestion. Time to move on. Time to let this leafy illusion fade behind you. You rise, stretch, and take one last look at the terraces stacked like ancient emeralds. "All right," you whisper, stepping toward the pathway leading out. "Let's see what burns next." You descend from the last terrace, letting the greenery fade behind you until the air dries again and the scent of water evaporates like a dream you're already forgetting. Ahead, the night glows faintly orange, as if someone left a very large, very irresponsible candle burning. You follow the flicker, sand crunching under your feet, and soon the outline of something monumental starts taking shape. A forest of towering marble columns rises from the earth like a petrified grove, each one illuminated by a trembling glow. You blink slowly, not quite trusting your eyes. This isn't just a temple, it's a full architectural flex. The Temple of Artemis spreads wide and regal across the plain, its roof carved with scenes from myth, its columns lined in impossibly straight rows. Standing before it feels like standing in front of a city made entirely of marble. You step closer, and the ground shifts from sand to fitted stone slabs, cool under your feet. Torchlight dances across the polished surfaces, making them shimmer as though the temple is breathing. You take in the sweeping staircase, the grand doorway, the carvings so intricate you half expect one of the figures to blink at you. A mainstream historical fact slides into your thoughts. This temple was rebuilt at least 3 times, the most famous version funded in part by the Lydian king Croesus, who, according to legend, he had so much gold he basically invented the concept of being rich. You run your hand along one of the nearest columns. The surface is surprisingly warm, which is odd because stone shouldn't feel like it's been sunbathing at this hour. Then again, maybe it isn't heat you're feeling. Maybe it's the echo of something else because, as you listen, the quiet is interrupted by the soft crackle of embers. The temple flickers again, and you realize the orange glow isn't torchlight at all. It's firelight. Ancient, repeating, inevitable firelight. You take a step back just as a curl of smoke drifts out from behind the outer colonnade. You circle to the side, keeping your distance. Here we go, you mutter, as the Temple of Artemis begins reenacting its favorite hobby, burning. But here's the strange part. You're not in danger. The flames feel distant, almost theatrical, like the temple is performing a memory for you rather than being destroyed in real time. The fire rolls along the roof beams, illuminating statues of Artemis so enormous they seem carved out of moonlight. One statue towers above you with her outstretched arms, animals clustered at her feet. The marble gleams softly, even with flames licking at its edges. A quirkier tidbit drifts through your mind. Ancient writers claimed the original temple burned down on the night Alexander the Great was born, as if Artemis herself was too distracted attending the birth to protect her sanctuary. You glance up at the glowing rooftop and whisper, honestly, relatable. The fire shifts, suddenly, flaring brighter, before retreating like a tide. It feels purposeful, almost respectful, as though this memory doesn't want to scare you, just teach you. You watch embers dance upward, swirling into the night sky, like tiny orange spirits. For a moment, they look like fireflies, delicate and harmless. Still, the questions linger. You walk along the temple's wide outer path, stepping over a charred beam that crumbles into ash when your foot brushes it. Smoke curls around your ankles, but it smells faintly of incense rather than destruction. You breathe it in slowly, letting the scent settle in your chest. You stop before another statue, this one of Artemis, crowned in a headdress of stars. Her face is serene, untroubled, as if centuries of fires and rebuilds were nothing more than minor inconveniences. You almost laugh. Must be nice, you whisper. I get stressed when my phone battery hits 20%. The temple flickers again, shifting between past and present. A gust of cool air rolls across the marble floor, momentarily pushing back the heat. You close your eyes and listen as sounds overlap. Workers chiseling stone, priests chanting hymns, merchants arguing over the price of offerings. Tourists, yes, tourists again, marveling loudly at the architecture. For a brief moment the temple stands fully restored, its columns gleaming white, its roof intact, its courtyards bustling with life. And then, like a camera glitch, the fire returns, roof beams collapsing inward with a thunderous groan. You watch, breath held, as flames engulf what moments ago looked eternal. Historians still argue whether the destruction caused by Herostratus, the man who famously set the temple ablaze to immortalize his name, left behind any parts that were reused in later reconstructions, or if the temple was rebuilt entirely, from scratch. You shrug inwardly. Either way, the temple clearly had a love-hate relationship with fire. You step inside, careful to avoid glowing embers. The interior is vast, with marble floors stretching into darkness. Huge braziers burn with unnatural calm, their flames frozen mid-flicker. Statues line the hall in perfect symmetry, goddesses, hunters, lions, nymphs. You walk between them, senses heightened, each footstep echoing like a heartbeat inside a giant chest. Ahead, the main altar glows faintly. A crackled inscription catches your eye, but the letters shift before you can read them, like the temple is choosing which version of its past to show you. You brush your fingers over the nearest column, feeling the grooves and ridges carved by hands long gone. Suddenly the fire dims again, replaced by moonlight streaming through a roof that isn't there anymore. The temple dissolves into ruins at your feet, broken columns, fallen capitals, grass pushing through ancient stones. You stand in the middle of the wreckage, watching as centuries collapse into a single breath. Then, without warning, the wind sweeps through. Again. and the temple rebuilds itself right before your eyes. Stone rises, statues reform, torches flare back to life. It's like the wonder is reminding you, I didn't fall once. I fell many times, and I got back up each time until I didn't. You step back out into the open air, the temple glowing quietly behind you. The sky has deepened into a velvety blue, and in the distance, a faint glow marks your next destination. A giant statue waits for you there, patient, proud, and overdue for its final story. You walk away from the Temple of Artemis, letting the last flickers of firelight fade behind you. The air cools as you move across the plain, and the landscape shifts again, as if the world is adjusting its stage for the next act. The ground becomes smoother, almost polished, and a faint scent of olive wood drifts into your senses. You inhale slowly. Something big and very self-important waits ahead. You round a low rise, and there he is. The statue of Zeus at Olympia rises from the earth like a god carved out of the night itself. You freeze mid-step, neck bending upward, until you feel that familiar pinch at the base of your skull. He sits on a massive throne, towering nearly 40 feet high, which means his pinky toe is probably taller than you. Great for him, humbling for you. He glows with a subdued golden light that seems to pour from the carved ivory of his skin and the gleaming gold plating of his robes. You take a few steps closer, jaw loosening, as your brain tries and fails to process the scale. One mainstream historical fact slips in. This statue wasn't just a big marble guy. It was a chryselephantine masterpiece crafted from ivory panels for the flesh and gold plates for the garments. Basically, the ancient world invented luxury materials long before modern influencers started doing gold aesthetic unboxings. You move closer, the stone floor smooth beneath your feet. A soft echo trails each step, swallowed by the cavernous space around the statue. The structure housing Zeus isn't fully there, not in the physical sense. It flickers between a grand marble temple and the ruins it eventually became. Columns appear solid one moment, fractured the next. The illusion isn't unstable, it's honest. It's showing you past and present simultaneously, like a memory projecting itself with a slightly mischievous sense of timing. Zeus doesn't flinch. His gaze is a calm, all-powerful stare of someone who has watched civilizations rise and collapse like bad sitcoms. His right hand holds a statue of Nike, the goddess of victory, balanced as effortlessly as you might hold a coffee cup. His left hand rests on a scepter topped with an eagle, a symbol of authority, or maybe a reminder that he's absolutely not the kind of guy you argue with. A quirky tidbit floats into your thoughts. Ancient visitors claim the statue was so massive that if Zeus stood up, he'd punch straight through the roof. You glance upward, half expecting to see a Zeus-shaped dent in the ceiling. Nothing there, but the mental image is vivid enough to make you snort softly. As you walk along the base, faint warmth radiates from the gold plates, despite the night around you. The air shimmers not with heat, but with tension. A hum underfoot makes you stop and flatten your palm to the floor. There it is again. A soft vibration. Mechanical? Seismic? Symbolic? Hard to tell. The statue seems alive in its own way, as if the materials are remembering their creation. Sculptors carving ivory, craftsmen hammering gold, priests offering prayers thick with incense smoke. Then the scene shifts. Lightning flashes, not real lightning, but a pale flicker of memory. The temple begins to warp and dissolve at the edges. The floor rumbles beneath you, and you instinctively widen your stance. The statue trembles, only slightly at first, then more. Cracks spiderweb through its ivory panels, racing up the legs, branching across the torso. Zeus remains serene, but the structure around him groans under invisible pressure. Historians still argue whether earthquakes played the main role in the statue's downfall, or whether its final destruction happened after it was relocated to Constantinople, where a fire supposedly consumed it. Both stories ripple through the scene now. The temple's columns buckle. Flames spark in the air. The statue shifts between two deaths crushed in its home or burned in exile. You stand among both versions, unable to tell which is the real one. You step back instinctively as the statue leans, then steadies, then flickers, like a bad video buffer. The flames brighten. Ivory melts at the edges. The ceiling collapses in slow motion, dust billowing like fog. And yet, through all of it, Zeus never loses his calm expression. If anything, he looks mildly inconvenienced, like this is the universe's version of a paperwork error. Then, just as the destruction reaches its crescendo, the entire scene rewinds. The flames retreat. The dust dissolves. Cracks slither shut. The statue reforms, pristine again. Gold gleams. Ivory shines. You exhale, realizing you'd been holding your breath. The world around Zeus softens, growing warmer. A faint scent of honey cakes and olive oil, the kinds of offerings ancient worshippers left, floats through the space. You can almost hear the festival crowds outside, cheering during the Olympic Games, priests chanting as they pour libations, the constant murmur of belief that once filled this place. You move toward the statue's base and rest your fingertips against the cool stone platform beneath him. Your touch doesn't disturb anything. If anything, it grounds you. You're not just looking at a ruin or a reconstruction. You're touching reverence, ambition, the need humans have to carve their gods big enough to impress even themselves. You take a step back. Zeus watches you without blinking. You swear just for a heartbeat. You see one corner of his mouth twitch, like he's fighting a smirk. Maybe he appreciates the attention. Maybe he finds your awe amusing. Or maybe that's just your imagination trying to lighten the mood before you're crushed by 40 feet of divine authority. The air shifts again. A breeze, cool, welcome, wraps around your shoulders, pulling you gently toward an opening in the temple wall. The light outside glows a faint, rhythmic orange. Not fire this time. Torches. The next wonder is waiting. Its stones heavy with the weight of kings and queens buried in its depths. You take one last look at Zeus, still regal, still serene, then turn away, ready to walk into the realm of the mausoleum. You step beyond Zeus's glowing chamber, and the world darkens, not ominously, just heavily, like the air is carrying a quiet weight. The ground becomes firmer, almost chalky, and the faint scent of stone dust thickens with each step. You follow the dim orange glow ahead, and soon, another monument rises from the night. A massive blocky silhouette perched on a high platform, its tiers layered like a giant stone wedding cake designed by someone who really liked right angles. You've arrived at the mausoleum at Halicarnassus. You pause at the base of the long staircase, exhaling slowly. This one feels different, not divine like the statue, not lush like the gardens, not fiery like Artemis's temple. This wonder hums with memory, politics, grief, pride, and a lingering touch of vanity. A structure built not for gods or entire cities, but for two people who wanted to be remembered across centuries. And, well, they definitely succeeded. You start up the staircase, running your fingers along the side wall. The texture surprises you, not rough, but smooth, almost polished. Moonlight slides across the steps in silver layers, revealing faint carvings that weren't obvious at first glance. Floral patterns, lion paws, even a stray chariot wheel. A mainstream, historical fact, nudges in this mausoleum was built for Mausolus, a satrap of Caria, and his sister wife Artemisia II, whose devotion to him is the kind of story ancient writers couldn't stop romanticizing. And yes, you caught that, sister wife. Ancient royalty had its own complicated family traditions. As you reach the first platform, a soft vibration passes beneath your feet. Not an earthquake, just the architectural memory unfurling again. The mausoleum flickers for a second, cycling through its ages. One moment it appears pristine, polished, and bustling with stonemasons putting on finishing touches. The next, it shows a version battered by time, weathered, chipped, and surrounded by the quiet ruin of a forgotten era. A breeze rustles your hair, and you turn to face the statues standing guard around the platform. They tower over you, muscular warriors, rearing horses, robed figures with stern expressions carved into marble. Some are missing arms, some heads. One warrior is missing both arms and looks like he's trying to shoulder shrug his way back into existence. A quirky tidbit pops up. Medieval knights later broke off pieces of these sculptures, literally parts of the wonder, using them as building material for a castle. Imagine raiding an ancient monument, shrugging, and saying, "Yeah, this will make a nice corner of the fortress." Humans have always had questionable DIY projects. You circle around, stepping through a colonnade of tall, slender pillars. The architecture is a unique blend: Greek elegance, Egyptian symmetry, and a hint of Lycian flair. You touch one column and feel grooves carved by workers who probably lived their entire lives thinking this building would stand forever. You whisper softly, "It kind of did, just not in one piece." Then, without warning, the air thickens. The mausoleum shimmers again, this time not between intact and ruined, but between day and night. You hear hammers, chisels, shouted instructions in a language your mind understands only as echoes. Workers haul massive stones up ramps. You see a flash of Artemisia standing on a balcony, surveying the work, her expression sharp, determined, grieving. Historians still argue whether Artemisia truly consumed her husband's ashes mixed with drink, as some ancient writers claimed, or whether that was dramatic storytelling. You glance up at the glowing balcony and think, yeah, I'm leaning toward dramatic storytelling. You move toward the main chamber, climbing another set of steps. The air cools noticeably, carrying a faint scent of clay and old incense. Two massive stone lions flank the doorway, their eyes set in permanent vigilance. You pass between them, your shadow stretching out across the dimly lit floor. Inside, the chamber is vast. The walls rise with impossible height, decorated with friezes depicting battles, parades, naval scenes, entire stories carved into stone. You step closer to one, running your fingers along the carved shield of a warrior frozen mid-swing. The detail is astonishing, even if partially worn by time. You can almost feel the sculptor's hand guiding yours. You look toward the center of the chamber, where a raised platform supports what once held the sarcophagi of Mausolus and Artemisia. The platform flickers empty one moment, adorned with intricately carved stone coffins the next. The flicker is slow, like the building is trying to decide which part of its story you need to see. You stand there quietly, letting the scene shift around you. The stone beneath your feet vibrates again, stronger this time. The chamber darkens at the edges, and the rooftop begins to dissolve, revealing night sky. Rain begins falling, not real rain, but a memory of centuries of storms that battered the structure. Water pours down through cracks, lightning flashes, the mausoleum creaks, and then comes the rumble. You widen your stance instinctively as the building shudders with the deep, rolling, the sound of distant earthquakes, the very ones that are believed to have eventually toppled the mausoleum. Columns buckle, friezes crack, chunks of marble crash to the floor. The rooftop statue, once a massive 4-horse chariot carrying Mausolus himself, shudders violently. For a moment it looks poised to leap into the storm. Then it collapses in a slow-motion crumble that somehow feels respectful. You brace yourself, even though none of this can touch you. But then quiet. The storm retreats, the chamber stills, the ruins settle. A soft wind moves through, carrying the scent of earth, damp stone, and centuries of dust. The mausoleum no longer shifts between forms. It rests now in its broken state, columns scattered, statues toppled, carvings buried under debris. And then something surprising happens. Soft golden light gathers around the rubble, reshaping the base, lifting fragments back into the air. The wonder reconstructs not as a full restoration, but as a ghostly memory. The translucent version of the original structure hovers in the air, overlaying the ruins beneath it. Beautiful, quiet, unassuming. You walk around the shimmering outline, absorbing its final message. The mausoleum didn't disappear. It became a part of other structures, other stories, other cities. Its stones live on in fortresses, its sculptures in museums, its legacy in the very word mausoleum. You step back into the night, leaving the ghost monument flickering behind you. The air grows lighter, and a faint sea scent rides the breeze. Ahead, an island, a towering bronze figure, a story of pride and collapse. Rhodes is calling. The ground beneath you shifts from firm stone to gritty sand again, and the faint scent of salt touches the air, soft at first, then stronger, like the ocean is slowly exhaling in your direction. You follow it instinctively, feet crunching over pebbles and shell fragments. The temperature drops just a little, not enough to chill you, but enough to make your skin perk up with the promise of open water. A low rumble drums through the ground, not an earthquake this time, but something heavier, like a memory preparing itself for its grand entrance. Then you crest a final ridge, and the world opens. An island rises from the dark sea, ringed with torch-lit walls. The harbour glows with flickering reflections. And there, straddling the entrance with a posture radiating, "I'm the main character," stands the Colossus of Rhodes. You stop walking altogether. Your mouth opens slightly. You might even whisper something profound like, "Whoa," but your brain hasn't sent instructions to your lips yet. The bronze giant towers above the harbour, far taller than any modern high-rise you've ever craned your neck at. His stance is wide, confident, utterly unapologetic, 1 foot planted on each side of the harbour entrance, or at least that's how legend paints him. The structure seems to shift between the textbook version and the scholarly version, where he stands beside the harbor instead. Your brain tries to reconcile both, but the Colossus just stands there glowing like a freshly polished trophy, doing whatever he wants. Moonlight ripples across his bronze skin, highlighting every sculpted muscle, abs, arms, thighs. The guy is clearly showing off. You almost want to mutter, "Okay, relax, Hercules." But he's not Hercules, he's Helios, the sun god, rendered in metal on a scale so dramatic you half expect him to wink at you. Ancient cities didn't build humble statues, they built these. You step closer, walking along a pier that appears out of nowhere, lit by torches mounted in iron baskets. The heat from the flames mingles with the cool sea breeze. The scent of salt and tar and old wood fills your lungs. In the distance, waves lap lazily against the rocks, and a couple of seagulls wheel overhead, their cries echoing across the open water. A mainstream historical fact settles neatly into your mind. The Colossus was built to celebrate Rhodes's victory over a besieging army, completed around 280 BCE, and stood roughly 33 meters tall, about the height of the modern Statue of Liberty's torso, which is impressive, considering ancient engineers didn't have cranes, forklifts, or YouTube tutorials titled Top 10 Mistakes to Avoid When Building Gigantic Gods. You continue down the pier, each step sending gentle vibrations through the wooden planks. As you approach the Colossus's bronze foot, you realize even his smallest toe is bigger than your entire torso. You touch the metal lightly. It feels cool and surprisingly smooth. For a moment, you imagine ancient workers polishing the surface, unaware that their creation would one day become the most famous statue to ever faceplant into history. A quirky tidbit bubbles up. Some medieval travelers claimed the fallen Colossus lay scattered across the ground so massively that few people could wrap their arms around the giant thumb. You glance at the thumb now, gleaming above you, and whisper, "Yeah, I'm not even reaching the knuckle." The air suddenly shifts. The torches flicker. A low groan ripples through the harbor, deep, resonant, unmistakably seismic. You freeze. A slow-motion shiver rolls through the statue's legs. A crack snakes up the bronze shin, glowing faintly as though lit from within. You widen your stance, déjà vu from every previous wonder kicking in. Here it comes. The Great Earthquake of 226 BCE wasn't dramatic and explosive, not at first. It was slow, grinding, relentless. The kind of tectonic temper tantrum that doesn't ask for attention, it demands it. The pier trembles under your feet. Waves start slapping harder against the rocks. The bronze giant sways. You stare up as the Colossus leans, just slightly at first. His arm trembles, his crown tilts. The glow of moonlight across his surface fractures into jagged shards. Historians still argue whether the statue shattered at the knees, buckled at the ankles, or snapped somewhere near the torso. Tonight, the memory doesn't choose one. You see all three possibilities flicker in front of you like a shattered timeline stitching itself together. One version, the knees bend inward with a thunderous groan. Another, the ankles twist and shear. A third, the torso cracks, sending the upper half tipping forward. The outcome is always the same. The Colossus falls. But here, in this memory world, the fall is gentle, almost respectful. The bronze titan descends through the air in a slowed ballet, limbs twisting gracefully instead of violently. His hand reaches, out not to catch himself, but as though he's saluting the city one last time. Then he touches the ground. The impact is muted, like the world has padded the earth for him. Dust rises, bronze fragments scatter. The harbor quiets. You walk through the debris field, massive sections of bronze, lying like abandoned armor after a colossal battle. One hand rests palm up, big enough to cradle a small boat. His face, cracked but serene, lies half buried in sand, the expression unchanged, calm, dignified, unfazed by the collapse. You crouch beside it, brushing dust from the carved cheek. The statue may have fallen, but it doesn't feel defeated. It feels at rest. For centuries, Rhodes left the remains where they fell, both out of awe and because an oracle supposedly warned them not to rebuild. You trace a line across the bronze and think, yeah, that tracks. Hard to argue with divine earthquake reviews. The wind shifts. A soft shimmer rises around the broken pieces, and for the moment the Colossus reassembles in ghostly form, towering once again, glowing faintly, a memory refusing to fade. Then the glow dims. The fragments settle. The harbor exhales. You stand, brushing sand from your hands. Ahead, the night grows lighter. The sound of waves deepens. And far across the distant water, a pinpoint of bright, steady light flickers over the horizon. A lighthouse is waiting for you. The tallest the ancient world ever built. The last beacon before the sea swallows everything. You leave the bronze ruins of the Colossus behind, brushing a thin layer of sand from your palms as the sea breeze strengthens. The air cools further sharp, salted, almost metallic, and it carries a low, rhythmic roar you recognize instantly. Waves battering stone. You follow the sound, your footsteps soft on the shifting sands, until the coastline stretches wide before you, a dark ribbon of water reflecting pale streaks of moonlight. Far out across the sea, a single white pulse flickers. Then again, steady, patient, a heartbeat made of light. You exhale slowly. The lighthouse of Alexandria calls you like a beacon which, to be fair, is literally its job. You walk along a narrow causeway that appears under your feet, as though the world is building the path just in time for your arrival. The sea churns on either side, waves slapping the stone foundations. The smell of salt and burning oil mingles with the wind. And then, through a curtain of sea spray, it emerges. A towering, geometric silhouette rising out of the harbor like the spine of some ancient sea serpent. The Pharos of Alexandria, tall, sharp, elegant, unapologetically extra. As you approach, the details sharpen. The lighthouse is made of pale limestone blocks that gleam faintly, even under moonlight. 3 tiers rise, one above the other square, then octagonal, then cylindrical, stacked like an architectural layer cake for someone who really likes geometry. On the very top sits a statue, indistinct at first, then slowly resolving into the figure of a god, likely Zeus or Poseidon holding something that glints in the darkness. A mainstream historical fact floats into your mind. The Pharos once stood around 100 to 130 meters tall, making it one of the tallest man-made structures on Earth for centuries. Before skyscrapers, before steel frames, before elevators that smelled faintly of anxiety, it was this, a lighthouse taller than ambition itself. You reach the base, stepping onto massive stone blocks weathered by centuries of waves. Barnacles cling to the lower edges. Thin trickles of water seep through cracks. You place a hand on one wall, feeling its chill. The blocks are enormous, each bigger than your entire body, laid with such precision that even millimeters matter. Above you, a warm glow bathes the upper tier. You step inside. The interior is dim, lit by a few oil lamps flickering along the walls. Narrow staircases spiral upward, almost dizzyingly steep. You climb slowly, hand trailing the cool stone, each step echoing into the chambers above. The air grows warmer as you ascend, and soon you hear the soft roar of fire. You arrive at the top platform, and the sight steals your breath. A massive open flame blazes at the center, fed by an intricate series of fuel lines and basins. The fire sends long ribbons of light into the night, illuminating the harbor far below. But it's not just fire doing the work. You notice a polished metal mirror behind the flame, huge, concave, gleaming like a captured piece of the moon. A mechanism of gears and pulleys supports it, turning the mirror with slow, deliberate movements to project the light farther out to sea. A quirky tidbit sparks in your mind. Some ancient sources claim the Pharos' mirror could focus sunlight into a beam capable of setting enemy ships on fire, a legendary ancient death ray. You squint at the mirror now and think, okay, Archimedes would be proud, but this thing looks more like a supercharged lantern than a laser cannon. Standing on the edge of the top tier, you gaze out across the dark water. The light sweeps in slow arcs, touching distant waves. Far-off boats gleam briefly as the beam passes over them. The whole harbor feels alive, breathing, shifting, waiting. But beneath the beauty, something else stirs. A faint vibration travels up through the stone, like the echo of a distant growl. The flame flickers. A cold breeze cuts through the warmth. Then the mirror trembles on its pivot. You step back instinctively. The first tremor hits like a drumbeat under your feet, not violent, but deep. The lighthouse sways slightly, its stone joints groaning. A second tremor follows, sharper, cracking a line across the floor near the outer edge. You widen your stance, gripping a railing that wasn't there a moment ago, but decided to appear for your safety. How thoughtful. Historians still argue whether the Pharos collapsed mostly due to a series of powerful earthquakes between the 10th and 14th centuries, or whether centuries of structural stress simply added up. Tonight, the memory gives you all versions at once. The flame flickers violently. The mirror swings too fast, casting wild streaks of light across the sea. The top tier shudders. Blocks shift. Dust rains from the ceiling as something below gives way with a low, thunderous crack. You feel the tower lean. Not much. Not enough to send you into panic, but enough to remind you that even giants get tired. The lighthouse trembles harder, and several stones from the middle tier shear off and plunge into the churning water below. A column collapses somewhere deep inside. The fire sputters. The mirror fractures first a crack, then a spiderweb of lines, then a sudden shatter scattering shards across the platform. But even in ruin, the Pharos refuses to fall all at once. It collapses in slow stages, century by century, like a titan unwilling to vanish too quickly. You walk through overlapping timelines, the lighthouse tall and proud, then fractured and weary, then half submerged in the harbor as fishermen tie their boats to its bones. Eventually, only a broken stump remains, stones scattered like fallen teeth along the shore. You step down onto the rubble, crunching shells and dust beneath your feet. The sea laps gently against what's left of the foundation. The lighthouse's ghostly outline flickers above the ruins for a moment, tall, luminous, unwavering before dissolving into the night. You turn from the shore, letting the sound of waves fade behind you. The air grows still again, and the moonlight softens. Ahead lies a quieter stretch of land, strange, uneven, covered with remnants of things not quite monumental enough to make the official list. The forgotten marvels await. You step away from the crumbled lighthouse stones, brushing grit from your hands as the ocean wind slowly dies behind you. The change is instant. One moment the air, tastes of salt and storm, and the next it's dry, calm, almost eerily neutral, like the atmosphere itself can't decide what mood to commit to. The ground beneath you firms into a kind of pale, compact earth, scattered with chunks of masonry, half-finished carvings, and lonely pillars that look like they failed the audition for the ancient world's main cast. These are the near wonders, the ones that almost made the list but didn't, the forgotten understudies of history. You walk forward, toes brushing dust that hasn't been disturbed in centuries. Ahead, the dim shapes of structures appear half-standing walls, fallen columns, sunken courtyards swallowed by time. They're not as massive as the wonders you've seen, not as theatrical, not as dramatic, but there's a quiet dignity here, the kind that settles on things built with devotion but denied the spotlight. A faint breeze moves across your shoulders as you approach the first ruin. The remains of an enormous platform rise before you, covered in carved reliefs smoothed by age. It takes your eyes a moment to adjust, but soon the patterns sharpen. Lions, warriors, processions of robed figures marching in neat rows. You realize you're standing before the ghost of the Ishtar Gate, Babylon's shimmering blue entranceway that absolutely could have been a wonder if the ancient judges hadn't been so obsessed with size and sparkly finishes. You place your hand on a section of crumbling brick, imagining the original cobalt glaze that once gleamed like a piece of the sky ripped down and shaped into a doorway. A mainstream historical fact nudges into the moment. The gate was part of Babylon's defensive walls, massive fortifications that some ancient writers claimed were so immense they deserved wonder status themselves. But lists are fickle, and the gate ended up as a footnote instead of a headliner. You step back, eyeing the faint outlines of arched towers and the empty sockets where guardian lions once roared in baked clay. A quirky tidbit rises. Archaeologists once unearthed glazed bricks so vivid that they looked freshly painted, leading more than one museum curator to panic over new graffiti until they realized Babylon simply had excellent pigment technology. You snort softly. Good to know, ancient people also valued a strong aesthetic. You drift onward, passing another mound of broken stone, until you arrive at a wide, circular depression, ringed by ruined columns. At first it seems unimpressive, just another pile of fallen architecture, but the curve is too perfect, too deliberate. The acoustics whisper when you step closer. You're standing inside the ghost of the theatre of Ephesus. You close your eyes and almost hear it. Tens of thousands of spectators leaning forward, murmuring, cheering. Ancient amphitheatres had impeccable sound design. You could whisper from the stage and be heard at the top row. You whisper, "Hello," and the air sends your voice curling, gently back to your ears, as if the ruins themselves are replying. The moment shivers slightly. Theatre crowds fade, replaced by flickers of Roman engineers, carving stone benches, adjusting stage machinery, complaining loudly about funding because some human problems never change. Historians still argue whether theatres like these influence the architectural layout of stadiums centuries later, or whether the similarity is just a natural accident of large gatherings needing seats. You lean back, letting the debate drift past you like a politely ignored mosquito. The world around you shifts again. Now you're standing at the base of a strange stepped structure, ziggurat-like, though smaller than the monstrous ones in ancient Mesopotamia. It flickers between ruin and completion, each version equally impressive. Terraces rise in blocky, symmetrical stacks. Staircases narrow into sharp gradients. The building hums with purpose, not religious, but civic. This is one of the lesser-known temple towers, the kind that served as administrative hubs, astronomical observatories, or simply big, "look what our city can do" statements. You walk up a crumbling step and feel a sudden downward pull, a memory of weight, of height, of priests climbing these exact stairs while carrying offerings or astronomical tools. You blink twice, and the scene sharpens. Robed workers sketching star charts, scribes recording omens in clay tablets, merchants offering spice baskets at the base. A breeze brushes past your cheek, carrying the scent of something earthy and sweet incense, maybe, or dried herbs long since blown to dust. This place hums with knowledge rather than awe, a reminder that not all grandeur is measured in size. Some wonders simply served their communities quietly, keeping time with the stars. You continue forward, the ruins thin out, merging into a wide plain dotted with smaller marvels. A stone aqueduct arch half standing, half collapsed. A marble rotunda whose pillars lean like they're gossiping about you. A partially buried obelisk that looks annoyed no one cleaned the sand off it for your arrival. You crouch beside the obelisk, brushing off a carved falcon whose eye stares at you with divine disappointment. A laugh escapes you. Sorry, budget cuts, I guess. Nearby, a massive stone slab rests on its side, carved with spirals and symbols you vaguely recognize. A carved bull's head juts out from one corner. This might have belonged to a temple that never quite reached wonder fame, a structure that dazzled locals but never captured enough attention from ancient travel writers. Again, some things never change. Even antiquity had influences. As you stand, the ruins shift in subtle pulses, as though deciding which fragments of themselves to show you next. You see flashes of structures that nearly made the Seven Wonders list. The Library of Alexandria before it burned, the Palace of Cyrus, the Temple of Solomon, the Walls of Nineveh, the Great Ziggurat of Babylon Etemenanki, sometimes proposed as a candidate by historians who like controversial takes. Each appears in a shimmer, then dissolves again. You walk through them like drifting through forgotten dreams, not quite real, not quite gone. The plain quiets, the air thickens, and a low, rolling wind sweeps across the ground, tugging at your clothes and nudging you onward. Ahead, clouds gather slowly, heavily, like the sky is swallowing its breath. Lightning flickers at the horizon, illuminating jagged rock formations and distant mountain silhouettes. The message is clear. The next part of your journey isn't about monuments themselves. It's about the forces that unmade them. Storms, sand, wind, time. The first raindrops touch your skin, cool, sudden, electric. Weather is about to tell its side of the story. The first raindrop lands on your cheek like a tiny cold fingertip tapping. Hey, pay attention. You blink upward just in time for a second drop to land squarely on your nose. Then a third. Then the whole sky decides to get involved. Within seconds, a gentle drizzle thickens into a curtain of rain shimmering in the silvery moonlight. It isn't aggressive. Not yet. It's the kind of rain that feels like an introduction. A preface. Nature clearing its throat before giving the lecture of a lifetime. You take a slow step forward, boots sinking slightly into mud that wasn't there 5 seconds ago. The ruins behind you fade into blurred silhouettes, their details washed away in soft strokes. Ahead, the horizon pulses with low flashes, lightning flickering inside clouds like someone is repeatedly switching a cosmic lamp on and off. Okay, you mutter, tugging your hood forward even though you're pretty sure weather in this world ignores clothing choices. Let's see what gets destroyed next. The landscape shifts beneath your feet. Where there was once compact earth and scattered stones, now the ground slopes into a wide, open valley. Wind sweeps through in a steady pulse, bending grass in synchronized waves. A sudden crack of thunder rumbles so deeply through your chest that it feels like your ribcage briefly joins the percussion section. This is where you begin to understand something fundamental. Not all wonders fell because of armies or arson or questionable political decisions. Some fell simply because the earth woke up one morning and said, "I'm bored. Time to remodel." You walk deeper into the valley, rain pattering softly against your shoulders. The temperature drops a degree or two, nothing dramatic, just enough to remind you how small you are in the grand scale of weather doing its thing. The wind picks up, lifting the edges of your clothing. A stone slab to your right shudders, its surface slick with rainwater, and you instinctively step back as it tips and collapses into the mud with a soft thud. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. Ancient structures didn't fare well against long-term erosion. Limestone and sandstone materials used in many wonders slowly dissolve under relentless rain, salty sea winds, and even just humidity. The Temple of Artemis, the Mausoleum, the Lighthouse, they all face this slow, grinding decay long before dramatic events finish them off. Weather was the patient sculptor always at work. You brush your fingers over another carved fragment, a relief of a bull's head, its features softened by centuries of rain carving tiny channels through the stone. Kind of impressive, you whisper, and kind of rude. As if responding, the rain suddenly shifts direction, driven by a gust strong enough to push you a step sideways. You steady yourself, squinting through the downpour. The valley narrows into a canyon, whose walls rise steep and jagged, dripping with water. Streams cascade down the rock face, carving new patterns as you watch. It feels like you're walking inside a time-lapse of erosion sped up just for your benefit. Lightning flashes again, illuminating the distant silhouette of a half-collapsed column perched precariously on a ledge. Before you can blink, a crack splits down the rock supporting it. The entire column sways once, twice, and then topples, shattering against the ground in an explosion of clay-colored dust and rain. You jump at the sound, heart thumping in your throat. A small laugh escapes you, half nerves, half awe. "All right, weather. We get it. You're dramatic." A quirky tidbit flickers into your thoughts. Some ancient Mediterranean builders actually used mixtures of ground-up shells, volcanic ash, and lime to create primitive, weather-resistant concrete. It was surprisingly durable, so durable that modern engineers still study it. You imagine an ancient foreman yelling at workers to add, just a pinch, more seashells, to prevent future storms from turning the building into ancient porridge. The canyon narrows further, funneling the wind into a low howl. Rain stings your cheeks now, carried sideways in sharp bursts. The ground becomes slick, forcing you to brace against the canyon walls for balance. It's strangely thrilling, like nature is giving you a guided tour of its demolition process. You push forward until the canyon opens into a vast plateau. The rain weakens to a mist, drifting across the flat expanse like breath. Here, the remains of once grand structures stand in scattered clusters, columns worn to smooth nubs, foundations half sunk, decorative carvings eroded into vague shapes resembling abstract art. The plateau stretches wide, and in the center lies a massive stone skull of a building cracked open, hollowed out, its skeletal ribs rising like a fossilized creature. You step closer, recognizing the remains of what might have been a shrine or small temple. The roof is long gone, the walls barely holding themselves upright. And yet, even now, the structure tries to stand with some dignity. Wind roars across the plateau, slamming into the fragile stone. A huge flake shears off, breaking into powder before it even hits the ground. Another gust follows, bending weeds and rattling fragments of pottery. Nature has no patience for nostalgia, only momentum. Historians still argue whether climate-related factors like prolonged humidity, sudden droughts, or sea level changes contributed significantly to the decay of several ancient wonders. The truth probably lies somewhere between a little and yep, absolutely ruined everything. Standing here, you can imagine both sides of the debate quite vividly. You wander through the plateau, hand trailing along the edges of a crumbling wall. The stone crumbles at your touch, grainy, soft, exhausted. You whisper an apology and step back, watching the wind take tiny fragments and scatter them across the plain like forgotten confetti. Gradually, the storm quiets. Rain eases into a gentle drizzle, then stops altogether. Clouds drift apart. The sky opens. A soft, pale light washes across the land, not sunlight, not moonlight, but something in between. Warm enough to soothe, cool enough to steady. It feels like a calm after centuries of storms. A peace the ruins might have once known. But the quiet doesn't last. A low rumble echoes from the far side of the plateau. A sound deeper than thunder, more powerful than wind. Something ancient, heavy, purposeful. Not weather, not time. This is the sound of armies, of conquest, of human ambition marching forward with steel and arrogance. You take a deep breath and turn toward the rising dust on the horizon. Weather had its say. Now mankind is ready to do its worst. You turn toward the horizon as the last threads of mist curl away from your shoulders. The quiet plateau, softened by rain and wind, now vibrates with something harsher, rhythmic, metallic, intentional. A low tremor travels through the ground, pulsing in steady beats. Not nature this time. Nature is unpredictable. This is organized, coordinated, human. The distant dust cloud thickens as it approaches, rising in tall, swirling columns like breath from some enormous beast. You step forward instinctively, though every part of your body whispers that whatever's coming isn't gentle. The wind carries the faint clang of metal on metal, the rumble of wheels, the murmur of voices blending into one steady tide of sound. Armies, you swallow. Humanity's oldest hobby. Building something magnificent, then promptly destroying it because someone else built it slightly differently. The first figures appear as dark silhouettes against the dimming sky, rows upon rows of soldiers marching in formation, shields glinting, spears catching light, banners snapping sharply in the wind. Horses snort and paw at the earth. Wheels creak under wagons filled with supplies, or siege weapons. You can't tell from this distance, but the shape is unmistakable. You move along the edge of the plateau, careful not to disturb loose stones still slick from the rain. The army doesn't see you. You're walking through memory again, witnessing the relentless force that tore countless wonders apart long before the earth had a chance to. A mainstream historical fact settles into your thoughts. Many ancient wonders weren't destroyed by time or weather, but by human conquest. The Temple of Artemis burned during invasions. The Hanging Gardens, if they existed, suffered from military conflict. The lighthouse endured multiple conquests that weakened its structure. Human ambition didn't just build wonders, it unbuilt them too. You crouch behind a cracked column stump as the army grows nearer, not for safety, but for perspective. Their footsteps thunder through the ground, kicking up dust. Boughs hang across their backs, torches flicker in rhythmic waves. You hear the captain's barked commands, sharp as snapped twigs. You lean against the broken stone. It feels cool, steady. The ruins around you shudder slightly, not physically, but emotionally, like they're remembering. The world blurs. Suddenly, the army isn't generic anymore. You're walking through flickering scenes of invading forces from every era. Assyrians carving through Babylonian streets, Persians sweeping across Anatolia, Romans tightening their grip on Alexandria, Crusaders storming Mediterranean harbors. Each timeline glides across the plain like layers of translucent silk, overlapping but never touching. You step into one of the scenes without meaning to. Dust swirls. A group of soldiers helmeted, armored rush past you. They carry torches, their flames wild and hungry. Behind them, civilians scatter, shouting in languages you don't understand but somehow feel the meaning of fear, urgency, grief. You turn toward a stone structure half hidden in the haze. A shrine? Maybe. A library? A storehouse? It doesn't matter what it was, it's about to be something else. A flaming torch hits the wooden door. The flames take hold instantly, licking up the frame, hungry for air and centuries-old parchment inside. You instinctively step back, feeling heat prickle along your skin. Smoke billows upward, joining the darkening sky. A soldier kicks the collapsing door inward, feeding the flames. Another swings a hammer against a carved column, cracking its base. The building groans, desperate. A quirky tidbit pops into your mind almost absurdly. Some ancient conquerors believed destroying monuments weakened the city's gods, giving the invading army a divine advantage. You watch a warrior smash a statue's face with the flat of his blade and mutter, "Yeah." Nothing says strategic superiority like breaking someone's sacred lawn ornament. But the humor fades quickly. The flames surge, stone crumbles, people flee. You see the same cycle reappear with brutal consistency. Conquer, dismantle, rebuild, rename, rewrite. Not only structures fall, entire identities collapse under marching boots. Another flicker, another scene. This time, the army isn't burning the building, they're dismantling it piece by piece. They pry marble slabs from the walls, load them onto carts, and wheel them away. Pillars are toppled, statues taken apart. A temple becomes raw material. A fortress becomes an architectural scavenger hunt. You step closer to one of the soldiers as he hammers a chunk of marble free. The carving on it shows a procession of delicate fine lines. He barely glances at it before heaving it into a wagon like a sack of grain. You whisper under your breath, "Oof, art critics would hate this." As the army moves on, the ruins they leave behind begin to settle into place. Walls crumble into heaps, roofs cave inward, sculptures topple. The air hangs heavy with dust and shrapnel-like fragments of history. Historians still argue whether ancient conquerors destroyed wonders purposefully to demoralize populations or simply didn't care about preserving them during campaigns. Either way, the result is the same. Beauty crushed under boots, too busy marching to notice what they've stepped on. The sky shifts again. The armies fade. The valley quiets. You stand alone among ruins reshaped by human hands, not careless, but intentional. Each toppled column, each charred wall, each fragmented carving carries the fingerprints of people who wanted to control, conquer, or claim. A warm wind stirs, almost comforting after all that noise. The plateau softens, turning the edges of the ruins into blurred silhouettes again. The dust settles, but something else stirs behind that wind, something heavier and more complex than conquest. A force that doesn't march or burn, but rewrites the meaning of monuments from the inside out. Religion, belief, new gods replacing old, new temples rising over ancient foundations. You inhale, deeply, feeling the shift in the air as the next chapter begins to take shape. Wonders fall not only because they're destroyed, but because the world changes what it wants to remember. You stand in the settling quiet, letting the dust of conquest drift back to the earth. The ruins around you look smaller now, less like casualties of war and more like abandoned ideas, artifacts from a time when different gods, different rituals, and different priorities shaped the world. The air changes again, dropping into a calmer, heavier silence. Not threatening, not mournful, just reverent. A faint scent of incense curls through the breeze, sweet, smoky, warm. It doesn't belong to anything the army's left behind. This is something new, something layered on top of the old. You follow it, stepping across cracked stone and splintered carvings until the ruins shift in tone. The destruction softens into repurposing. Chiseled edges smooth into worn steps. Broken shrines morph into foundations for newer structures. The air hums with whispers. Not languages you recognize, but you feel them chants, hymns, quiet prayers, pressed into the stone like fingerprints. You've stepped into the era of religious rewriting. Ahead, a small cluster of columns rises from the rubble, some ancient, some newer, all mismatched. One leans slightly, as if exhausted by centuries of being asked to support yet another spiritual renovation. At the base of these columns sits an altar, or rather, the ghost of one. It flickers in and out of shape, sometimes carved from marble, sometimes made of wood, sometimes absent altogether. You approach it slowly, feeling the texture of the world shift with each step. You're not just walking forward, you're walking through centuries of faith. A mainstream historical fact nudges gently into your thoughts. Many ancient temples were converted when new religions took root. Old statues were toppled or buried, sanctuaries rededicated, holy spaces repainted or plastered over. Not always out of malice, often simply because communities grew, identities changed, and buildings were too precious to abandon. You reach the altar, brushing away dust that seems to appear faster than you can clear it. The design flickers first a relief of Artemis, then a blank slab, then a carved cross, then a mosaic sunburst. Each version feels complete for a heartbeat before dissolving. You whisper softly, "You must have been remodeled more times than my grandma's kitchen." A faint breeze answers, stirring your hair. Maybe the altar appreciates the joke. Hard to tell with ancient architecture. You step into what used to be a grand hall, its roof half gone, its columns leaning like tired monks. A soft, warm light flickers from the far wall. You approach and find a niche carved into the stone. Inside it, a statue shifts between forms. A Greek goddess one moment, a Roman deity the next, a Christian saint after that. The transitions are gentle, like the world is carefully flipping through its own identity. A quirky tidbit rolls into your thoughts. Some early Christian communities literally carved crosses into the foreheads of old pagan statues, rather than breaking them. Kind of like telling ancient gods, "Congrats, you're promoted. New role, same face." You glance at the flickering statue, And imagine someone in the 4th century doing exactly that while humming a hymn off-key. The hall trembles faintly, not from war or weather, but from crowds. You hear footsteps echoing, monks chanting, priests reciting, pilgrims whispering. The sound isn't loud, but it's dense, layered, like history is folding inward so you can hear generations at once. The scene shifts. The old pagan hall becomes a church for a moment. Wooden beams added between marble columns, frescoes painted over older wall carvings, incense pots hanging from chains. Sunlight streams through an opening in the roof, illuminating dust that dances like tiny golden spirits. You walk through the beam, warming your skin. Then the hall blinks again. Now it's something else, an Islamic prayer hall, its walls repainted with geometric patterns, old statues removed entirely. The prayer carpet glows below your feet as if freshly laid. Someone whispers a verse in a language that feels ancient and familiar all at once. Then another blink. Back to ruins, bare columns, dust, silence. Historians still argue whether religious conversions preserved ancient architecture more often than they destroyed it. Some monuments survived precisely because new beliefs repurposed them. Others fell because they symbolized the previous era too strongly. The truth, as always, seems to be a shimmering blur, just like the hall around you. You step outside into a courtyard ringed with broken columns. Above you, the sky glows a faint amber, as if lit by thousands of candles. The courtyard itself is quiet, but carved stones litter the ground, fragments of gods, saints, symbols, each telling the story of a different moment in time. You kneel beside one shard. It shows a delicate hand holding a laurel wreath. Next to it lies another fragment, a piece of a Christian fresco showing the corner of a halo. The two pieces fit together in size, but not in purpose. You place your hand over them both, feeling warmth pulse through your palm, as if the stones are remembering all their identities at once. A soft wind sweeps through the courtyard. Not cold, not warm, just present. You stand, brushing off your hands. The air grows denser again, like something big is preparing to enter the story. But this time, it isn't human armies. It isn't new religions. It's the earth itself. Heavy footsteps ripple through the ground, except they're not footsteps, they're tremors. Deep ones, low ones, ancient ones. The ruins around you rattle ever so slightly, dust falling from cracks, pebbles tapping against the earth like nervous fingertips. You inhale slowly. Natural forces took down many monuments. But earthquakes? They're the most dramatic storytellers of them all. And one is warming up. The tremor doesn't slam into you all at once. It starts quietly, so quietly you're not even sure you feel it at first. Just a subtle, almost polite shiver under your feet, like the earth is clearing its throat before it starts talking properly. You pause mid-step, one hand resting on a worn column, and the stone hums faintly against your fingertips. Then it happens again. A deeper vibration rolls through the ground, slow and low, like a distant drum beat. Dust drifts down from a crack in the wall beside you, tiny grains slipping through the air in lazy spirals. You tilt your head, listening. There's no wind this time, no voices, no armies, just that heavy, pulsing rhythm from somewhere far below. You're in earthquake country now. You move forward carefully, feet testing each patch of ground before committing your weight. The ruins around you look different here, less burned, less looted, more snapped. Walls lean at unnatural angles. Staircases end abruptly where the upper floors collapsed long ago. Columns lie in neat rows on their sides, like giant stone logs that someone knocked over in a very dramatic game of dominoes. You pass a row of broken pillars, each fractured at nearly the same height. It's eerie, like a giant came through with a sword and took one clean swing. A mainstream historical fact floats into your mind. Major earthquakes in the eastern Mediterranean, especially around the 3rd century BCE, and later in the 4th, 6th, and 14th centuries CE, did enormous damage to cities like Rhodes, Halicarnassus, and Alexandria. The Colossus, the Mausoleum, the lighthouse, all caught in the tectonic crossfire. You step over a pile of rubble that crunches under your weight. At first, you think it's just debris. But as you look closer, you see the faint outline of carved drapery, a piece of a once magnificent statue, now reduced to a lumpy stone avalanche. You brush off some dust. A bit of a foot appears, toes delicately shaped. Whoever the statue was, they had excellent sculpted ankles. The ground shivers again. This one's stronger. Loose stones rattle. A nearby fragment of arch shifts, grinding softly. You instinctively brace against the nearest upright column. It's cracked down the middle, split like an old bone, but it holds for now. You rest your forehead against the stone and breathe, feeling the faint tremor run through your skull. "Okay," you murmur softly. Message received. "You're powerful. We get it." As if in answer, the world around you briefly flickers. For a moment, you're not in ruins anymore. You're in a bustling city. Freshly laid pavements, intact walls, merchants arguing, children weaving between market stalls. Somewhere nearby, a temple stands fully upright. Boats bob busy in the harbour. The ground under your feet feels stable, reliable, almost smug about it. Then, without warning, everything snaps. A violent jolt throws you sideways, even though your body doesn't technically exist here. The earth bucks like it's been punched from below. Roof tiles slide off in waves. Walls crack in zigzags. A statue loses its head in a single sharp break. The marble skull plummeting and exploding into pieces on the street. People scream, not in a chaotic roar but in thousands of individual voices that somehow blend into one sharp sound. Dust erupts into the air, thick and blinding. Through the haze, you watch a colonnade buckle in slow, terrible motion columns, tipping into each other until they collapse in a roaring cascade. A temple roof folds inward, as if someone suddenly remembered gravity exists. You see a glimpse of harbour walls crumbling, water surging in to claim pieces of the city in foamy bites. Then, the vision dissolves. You're back in the quiet ruins. Same broken stones, same cracked columns. No panicked crowds now, just silence, and the occasional tick of shifting debris settling into its final position. Your heart takes a moment to catch up, beating, faster, even though nothing can really fall on you here. Still, your instincts don't know this is only a memory. They just know that the ground moved, and that's not supposed to happen. A quirky tidbit floats through your thoughts like a small, oddly cheerful boat in the middle of a heavy sea. Some ancient cultures believed animals could sense earthquakes before humans felt anything. There are stories of snakes slithering out of their holes, birds going silent, dogs whining and scratching to get out of buildings. You glance around half expectantly, but the only creature you see is a carved lion head that fell off a wall centuries ago. If it sensed anything, it kept it to itself. You wander deeper into the fractured cityscape, passing an entire staircase that now leads nowhere, ending abruptly at a jagged break where the upper level collapsed. You look up through the gap, spotting a sliver of sky. It's oddly beautiful, like the building decided it wanted a skylight, and the earth just obliged, aggressively. Historians still argue whether earthquakes were the primary cause of certain wonders' total destruction, or if they simply weakened them for later damage by weather, neglect, or human interference. The lighthouse of Alexandria, for example, didn't vanish after a single dramatic quake. It took several over centuries, each one carving away more stability, until the structure finally gave up and slid into legend and partly into the sea. You step into what used to be a grand hall. The floor is fractured into uneven plates. A once central statue lies face down, only its shoulders still attached to the base. You circle it slowly, almost apologetic, as if you've walked in on someone who tripped and never got back up. The air is still, heavy. If fire is quick and noisy, and war is loud and deliberate, earthquakes are the quiet monsters. They don't set out with strategy or anger. They don't care who built what. They simply shift, adjusting the crust of the planet like someone tugging at a slightly crooked tablecloth, and every structure sitting on top just has to deal with it. You place your palm flat against the cracked floor. For a moment, nothing happens. Then you feel it. A tiny, almost imperceptible pulse. Not enough to shake stones, not enough to topple anything. Just a reminder that the earth is still moving. Always moving, even when everything above it seems frozen in place. You imagine all those ancient architects, sculptors, and planners trying to build eternity on a planet that keeps shrugging. You breathe in and out, slowly. The tremors fade, the ground stills. Whatever tectonic tantrum you walked through has passed for now. The ruins settle back into their long, patient waiting. They've learned to live with the occasional rude interruption. You're just passing through. You stand and look ahead. The air smells faintly charred now, even though nothing is burning where you stand. Not yet. It's like the future has. Already exhaled into this place a whiff of smoke, oil, old wood. You've seen what water can do. What wind and rain can carve, what armies can trample, what earthquakes can snap. Now it's time to watch the most familiar destroyer of all. The quiet little flame that pretends to be helpful, right until it isn't. Fire is waiting. The faint smell of something charred lingers in the air, subtle at first, like someone lit a match just out of sight. You inhale again, deeper this time, and the scent strengthens. Smoke, dry wood, a hint of old oil. The kind of smell that ghosts cling to long after the fires have died. You follow it instinctively, stepping over cracked pavement until the ruins blur into something darker, heavier, and warmer. Fire leaves fingerprints everywhere, even centuries later. The world ahead glows with a dim orange tint. Not bright flames, not yet, but the memory of them. As if the landscape itself still smoulders with old grudges. You feel the temperature rise slightly, the air drying your throat as you walk into a small, abandoned courtyard surrounded by half-standing pillars. Most are scorched black on one side, white on the other, like they couldn't decide which version of themselves to present to history. You glide your palm along one pillar. Your fingertips come away with a dusty smear charcoal. Centuries old, but still clinging on like a story refusing to be forgotten. A mainstream historical fact slips into your thoughts. Fire destroyed or severely damaged countless ancient structures, from the Library of Alexandria to the Temple of Artemis, from sacred shrines to entire districts of major cities. Wood roofing, pitch-coated beams, textiles, scrolls, all acted like a buffet for even small sparks. Even the strongest stone couldn't withstand prolonged, intense heat. Some marble literally exploded when fires reached high temperatures. You step deeper into the courtyard, and the world shifts. A warm gust of air hits your face. Embers glow faintly around the edges of the walls. Suddenly, you're walking through overlapping timelines again, dozens of fires, small and large, flickering through centuries like scenes in a burning film reel. A small wooden shrine catches fire from a toppled oil lamp. A wandering spark ignites a storeroom filled with papyrus scrolls. A lightning strike sets a roof ablaze after a summer drought. A careless candle tips over during a late-night ritual. A torch carried by an invading army touches a tapestry soaked in incense resin. The world blinks. A roof beam falls in slow motion beside you, scattering a shower of glowing embers that drift around you like fireflies. You flinch instinct, but you feel no pain. The flame is memory, not substance. But the heat? The heat is real enough to make your skin tingle. You step around the fallen beam, studying the burnt edge. The wood is curled outward, like a blackened tongue frozen mid-scream. A quirky tidbit rises. Ancient builders. Sometimes mix straw or hair into plaster to strengthen it. Great for construction, terrible when the building caught fire. Some temples burned so intensely that melted bronze figurines were later found pooled on the ground like metallic candle wax. You walk on, following the glow of flickering memories. The path leads through what feels like an ancient marketplace. Half-collapsed awnings hang overhead. Charred wooden stalls lean like exhausted skeletons. The ground beneath your feet is uneven, textured with fossilized ash and melted clay. A strange hush fills the air. Fires make their own kind of silence, roaring loud enough to drown everything else into a muffled hum. You hear it now. A low rumble. A hiss. The sound of flames curling through beams, catching cloth, licking stone. The world flickers again. Now you're standing inside a grand hall, pillars soaring above you, shadows dancing wildly across the walls. A tapestry catches fire in one corner, flames rushing upward with startling hunger. Smoke gathers at the ceiling, swirling like storm clouds trapped indoors. You walk toward the burning corner, watching as the fire devours embroidered figures. Gods, heroes, kings, myths, hundreds of hours of artistry erased in seconds. A small voice inside you whispers, almost apologetically, it didn't even need to be an accident. Fires were often deliberate, strategic, ritualistic, desperate. Cleansing, some called it. Cruel, others argued. Necessary, insisted a few. Historians still debate whether the Great Fire of Alexandria that damaged the library was sparked by accident, warfare, or controlled burning. Records blur. Accounts contradict. You watch ghostly scrolls ignite before your eyes, curling into delicate black spirals of ash. Each one seems to whisper a secret it never got the chance to share. You extend your hand. A scroll disintegrates before your fingers reach it. You exhale. Sorry, you whisper. Wrong time to try reading. As you move on, a new scene takes form around you. This one, smaller, quieter, a simple home. Clay walls, a hearth in the center, a pot overturned, flames creeping across a woven mat. A child's carved toy lies half-melted on the floor. It's not a wonder, not a temple, not a monumental building, just a home lost to a household fire, and yet the sadness in the air is as heavy as anything you've seen. Wonders fall in dramatic ways. Ordinary lives fall quietly. You step outside, the glow intensifying ahead. The ruins give way to a wide-open expanse, where shards of stone radiate outward in a circle like debris from an explosion. The air grows hotter. Embers swirl around your ankles in gentle spirals. A towering structure flickers before you, the silhouette of something vast, once beautiful, now gutted by flames. A sanctuary? A library? A palace? It keeps changing, cycling through countless lost buildings, as if every ruin claimed by fire wants to be seen just for a moment. You watch each, memory burn, wood beams collapse inward, roofs cave, statues crack under heat, paint blisters off walls, stone glows red, then white, then fractures like brittle ice. The world becomes a kaleidoscope of destruction, but not in a violent, chaotic way. Fire is deliberate, focused, hungry, and then silence. The flames vanish. Smoke dissipates. The air cools. The ruins fall quiet. But something new emerges in the distance. Not destruction, not conquest, not rot or erosion. Water. You hear it first, a deep rolling roar. Then the ground begins to tilt downward, sloping toward a coast far more turbulent than the one near the Pharos. The air thickens with salt. A heavy wind gusts toward you, carrying spray and the unmistakable scent of tide and depth. The sea is coming, and it doesn't care what you've built. The wind sharpens as you step toward the coast, no gentle breeze this time, but a deep, lung-filled exhale from something enormous. The ruins grow sparse behind you, scattered like crumbs on the trail of history, and the ground softens into wet sand. Every footstep sinks just a little, like the earth is warning you. Don't get too comfortable here. The sound comes next. A long, rolling roar, steady, patient, vast. Not like waves brushing the shore, but like entire bodies of water shifting their weight. You take a few more steps, crest a low dune, and suddenly the world opens into a turbulent coastline that looks older than memory and angrier than any storm you've crossed so far. The sea stretches out before you, dark and towering, its waves curling upward like the backs of giant creatures surfacing for breath. Spray explodes against jagged rocks. The air tastes sharp, metallic, electric. You inhale slowly, feeling your lungs fill with the ocean's restless mood. Far offshore, something glimmers beneath the surface shapes of walls, pillars, collapsed structures swallowed by the tide. They appear only when the waves roll back, flashing pale stone, through the black water like a blink of an eye. You edge closer to the shoreline, watching the waves crash and retreat. The sea has swallowed more wonders than most people realize, and tonight its voice is loud enough to tell every story at once. A mainstream historical fact pulses through your mind. Rising sea levels, coastal erosion, and seismic subsidence dragged parts of ancient cities, underwater sections of Alexandria's royal quarter, Herakleion, parts of roads, even sections of ancient harbors across the Mediterranean. The sea doesn't just erode buildings, it relocates them. You crouch near the surf, brushing your fingers through wet sand. It's surprisingly cold, like holding a handful of liquid night. An unexpected memory of the lighthouse flashes. Some believe remnants of its base still sit underwater off Pharos Island, visited by divers who swim among blocks that once supported one of the tallest buildings on Earth. You straighten and watch the water again. A strange sensation washes over you. The shoreline feels like it's breathing, inhaling the sand beneath your feet, exhaling broken shells and tiny artifacts carried from who knows where. Something glints near your boot. You nudge it gently and fish it out of the foam. A small bronze figurine, green with oxidation. You wipe it. A stylized dolphin appears under your fingers. A quirky tidbit bubbles up. Ancient coastal cities often tossed votive offerings, tiny statues, coins, charms into the water as gifts to sea gods. Marine archaeologists routinely find them centuries later in places where no temple ever stood. The ocean keeps the tips. You place the figurine back into the surf. The next wave snatches it instantly, pulling it back into its collection. The wind shifts abruptly, whipping your clothes like sails. The sea surges higher, breaking against the rocks with new intensity. And then it happens. The ground trembles beneath your feet. But this isn't an earthquake. It's the water, itself shifting. The tide draws back farther than it should, farther than is natural. You raise your eyebrows. "Oh, great," you mutter. You're doing the dramatic reveal. And dramatic it is. The sea retreats so far that the seabed stretches out before you like a newly discovered landscape. Stone foundations appear, soaked but unmistakable columns lying sideways, staircases leading nowhere, huge blocks that once formed seawalls or palaces now carpeted in algae. Even in ruin, they hold their shape with a quiet dignity. Historians still argue whether certain coastal collapses were due to sudden events, tsunamis, storm surges, seismic shifts, or gradual erosion over centuries. Tonight, the memory refuses to choose. The timeline flickers, showing long erosion processes overlapping with one violent moment. The sea pauses in its retreat, the wind holds its breath. You know what's coming. A distant rumble builds across the horizon, soft at first, then deepening into a thunderous growl. The sea at the far edge bulges upward, growing taller and darker, its crest glowing white with foam. The wall of water rises higher, higher, until it looks like the ocean is standing up. Time slows. The wave begins its charge. You don't run, you can't. This isn't a wave meant to sweep you away. It's a story reenacting itself. It moves not with deadly speed but with heavy grace, like a leviathan returning to reclaim what once belonged to it. The wave crashes, not in a violent, explosive shatter, but in a monumental, breathtaking sweep. Water floods the exposed seabed, roaring across the ruins with unstoppable momentum. You feel the force pass through you, washing over broken columns, swirling around shattered steps, lifting artifacts into its embrace like long-lost children. The sea takes everything, and when the wave recedes once more, the ruins have disappeared beneath its surface again, part of the drowned world. The light softens, the wind loosens, the water calms. You stand at the edge of the shore as the sea exhales its final breath, as though satisfied with the retelling. The tide settles into a gentle rhythm. Foam laps quietly around your boots. Somewhere deep below, the ancient city sleeps again. You turn from the water, brushing salt from your skin. The world behind you is dry again, shimmering faintly. And as you walk inland, the sand firms beneath your feet, shifting into a surface mixed with gravel and broken slabs. The next force waiting to tell its story isn't natural at all. It's human. Hands that built. Hands that dismantled. Hands that stole. Salvaged. Carted away. And repurposed. You can already hear distant chiseling. "Urban mining," you whisper. "Here we go." You leave the shoreline behind, brushing the last traces of salt from your palms as the air grows still again, still in a way that feels purposeful, like someone backstage has pulled a giant velvet curtain shut. The roar of the ocean fades into a soft murmur, and the ground beneath your feet hardens into packed earth mixed with broken stone. Every step echoes faintly, the sound bouncing off invisible walls as if the world is tightening its focus. Then you hear it. Tap, tap, chink, S, F. The unmistakable rhythm of chisels. You follow the sound, the way you'd follow the smell of baking bread, or the bass line of your favorite song drifting through a wall. It leads you into a wide plain scattered with ruins, columns on their sides, cracked lintels, half-buried mosaics dulled by centuries of dust. But the chiseling doesn't sound ancient. It's sharp, clean, intentional. You step over a fallen pillar and freeze. Before you is a group of figures, ghost-like but detailed, enough to feel real. Workers ancient, medieval, early modern, overlapping in translucent layers. Some wear sandals and tunics, others wear wool cloaks and iron tools at their belts. Some haul wagons, some chip stone. All of them are doing the same thing, dismantling. In front of them lies what once must have been an enormous structure, something magnificent. But now it's a quarry, a scavenger's dream, a construction supply store carved from the bones of the past. You exhale slowly. You knew this section was coming, but it still hits harder than you expected. Humans didn't just let wonders fall, they took them apart, piece by piece. A mainstream historical fact rises. After the mausoleum at Halicarnassus fell into ruin, the Knights of Street, John used its stones to fortify their castle in Bodrum. The Temple of Artemis was systematically ransacked for building materials. Even the Great Pyramid lost its outer casing stones to Cairo's medieval builders. When something is grand, someone eventually thinks, hey, that would make a great wall. You watch as one worker wedges a thick iron pry bar beneath a carved marble slab. The slab tilts, slides, and crashes onto a sled made of logs. Another worker signals, and the sled begins to move, dragged by ropes over the dusty ground. You take a step closer, kneeling beside a pile of freshly detached fragments. One piece holds a delicately carved floral pattern. Another shows half of a lion's mane. Yet another has letters Greek, perhaps chiseled into its surface, worn but still readable if you squint. You pick up one fragment. It's lighter than you expect, the edges crumbling slightly under your touch. The stone seems tired, like it's been waiting too long for someone to acknowledge what it used to be part of. A quirky tidbit comes to mind. In some medieval towns, ancient columns were reused whole, not even trimmed down, just plucked from a ruin and placed in a church or mansion. People even repurposed carved statues as building supports. Imagine propping up your new porch with Hercules because you didn't feel like carving a fresh column. You walk deeper into the plane. The dismantling intensifies. An entire wall once adorned with reliefs is being broken apart with rhythmic blows. A worker swings a hammer, cracking a frieze that once depicted a royal procession. A second worker grabs the pieces and tosses them into a cart as casually as if they were firewood. You're kidding, you mutter. That was art. A transparent medieval mason glances your way, not seeing you, but reacting to something in your tone, then shrugs and keeps hammering. This is his job, his duty, his livelihood. To him, you're the unreasonable one. What's the point of leaving a structure to rot when you can build something useful from it? The world flickers again. Now it shows a different era. Roman soldiers carting off Greek statues as war trophies. Some end up decorating villas. Others become fashionable garden ornaments. A few centuries later, the same statues lie broken again, reused as mortar filler. You walk along a path lined with ghostly wagons loaded with ancient marble, some bound for palaces, some for fortresses, some simply for new city walls. Every piece carries a story, but the stories blur as they blend into new structures. Historians still argue whether this repurposing was an act of practicality, disrespect, or unconscious preservation. After all, some ruins survived precisely because people turned them into foundations for newer buildings. You keep walking until you reach a massive archway, only it's not really an archway. It's three mismatched chunks of ancient wonders stacked into a gateway for some medieval city that no longer exists. One block has an Egyptian motif. Another has Greek geometric patterns. The topmost stone looks Roman. It's architectural patchwork. Frankenstein archaeology. And somehow, it works. You touch the central block, feeling not just the cold stone but the strange sense of continuity. Humans borrow, humans salvage, humans adapt. They always have. A faint grinding sound pulls your attention to the right. There, a transparent figure pushes a large wheeled cart. On it lies something huge, massive, curved, intricate. A statue head. It's beautiful even in ruin, smooth cheeks, perfect proportions, a faint smile that survived being toppled, battered, repurposed, forgotten. You step closer and run your thumb along its brow. It was once a god. Now it's rubble on a cart. The worker hauls it away, ghost-like wheels squeaking. You breathe out, feeling a strange mix of sadness and admiration. Humans are destructive, yes, but they're also resourceful, practical, creative. They take what they need, sometimes too much, sometimes just enough. The plain around you begins to glow faintly, signaling that this chapter is ending. The workers fade out. The carts dissolve, the chisels still. The ruins settle into quiet heaps. Then, from the far distance, a new kind of light flickers. Soft, golden, deliberate. Not destruction, creation. Monuments rising, not falling. A reminder that humans don't only tear down wonders, they build new ones too. You turn toward the glow. New wonders await. You follow the soft golden glow rising on the horizon, letting the dismantled ruins fade behind you like the closing scene of a long, heavy chapter. The air lightens, not in temperature, but in spirit, as if the world is quietly reminding you that history isn't just collapse and decay. Humans don't only break things, they also build, imagine, rebuild, and start over with an enthusiasm that borders on stubborn optimism. Your feet carry you onto firmer ground, stone worked smooth by hands far newer than those who carved the ancient wonders. Grass pushes through the cracks, here and there, not as a sign of abandonment, but as decoration, like nature and architecture, decided to split the rent instead of fight for it. Then you see them, new wonders, not official ones, not necessarily on any ancient traveler's list, but monuments that rise into the night with confidence and a silent dare. Judge us too. Buildings from eras that came after the ancients, medieval, Renaissance, even modern glow with their own grandeur. Towers, cathedrals, fortresses, bridges, domes so enormous they look like stone bubbles caught mid-pop. You stop in your tracks because the first one looming in front of you isn't shy about its importance. Chartres Cathedral. It appears as if carved out of moonlight, its flying buttresses arching like stone wings. Stained glass windows shimmer, not with sunlight of course, but with a ghostly inner glow that gives them the look of illuminated gemstones. You wander toward the facade, stepping into the soft shadows cast by carved saints and biblical scenes, arranged like a stone tapestry. A mainstream historical fact drifts in. Chartres is one of the best-preserved Gothic cathedrals in Europe, so revered that it became a model for Gothic architecture. Its stained glass windows, especially the deep blues, remain some of the finest ever created. You tilt your head back, eyes widening as you try to take in its impossible height. How humans went from carved lions and marble colonnades to delicate stone lacework reaching for the heavens. Well, that's human ambition doing what it does, just evolving its aesthetic. You step inside. The interior glows with impossible colors, reds, blues, greens, golds spilling across the floor in kaleidoscopic patterns. You walk through a drifting patch of blue light, and it washes over your arms like liquid sapphire. Voices swirl faintly in the air, monks chanting, choir boys singing, craftsmen discussing how on earth they're going to raise another flying buttress with only ropes and nerves of steel. The building hums with faith and engineering. A quirky tidbit flickers in. Medieval builders sometimes carved tiny caricatures of their bosses or rivals into hidden corners of cathedrals. Little stone pranks frozen in sacred architecture. You chuckle softly and whisper, "Respect." You exit through the far door and walk into a courtyard that shifts seamlessly into a new landscape. The cathedral dissolves into mist, replaced by a mountainous silhouette crowned with something massive. Now you're staring at Machu Picchu. Terraces cascade down the mountainside like giant green steps, arranged with almost mathematical precision. Stone walls hug the cliffs with mind-blowing accuracy. Clouds drift low, brushing the edges of the citadel. You take a tentative step forward, half expecting the stones to rearrange themselves in polite apology for the altitude. A breeze whistles past, carrying the scent of moss, stone, and thin air. You touch a perfectly cut stone, block its joints so precise you couldn't slide a piece of paper between them. You whisper, "No mortar." Seriously? The ruins shimmer in agreement. Then the world shifts again. Now you stand on a wide, elegant structure, spanning a river, the Rialto Bridge in Venice, glowing under lantern light. Gondolas glide beneath it silently, their reflections stretching in the water like long shadows. You brace yourself on the railing, leaning slightly over the edge. The bridge isn't ancient, but it carries its own brand of wonder, proof that humans built beauty, even in flooded, sinking cities. You drift from bridge to fortress. The Alhambra rises next, its red walls shimmering under moonlight, its courtyards filled with intricate tilework and burbling fountains. Arabic calligraphy wraps across archways, like poetry frozen into geometry. The ceilings gleam with gold-painted stars. Historians still argue whether structures like Alhambra or Angkor Wat belong in conversations of new wonders, or whether they should be considered part of separate cultural traditions altogether. You smile at the idea of everyone debating categories, while human creativity simply continues. The landscape transforms again. Towering spires rise into the air, linked by narrow bridges of stone. A castle, Neuschwanstein, perched on a cliff like someone took a fairy tale and built it out of solid rock just to prove it could be done. Its white turrets reflect moonlight, and clouds swirl below it like soft armor. You blink. Now you're in front of the Taj Mahal. Its marble glows faintly blue in the night, reflecting in a long pool that ripples gently, even though no wind seems present. The structure feels like a sigh carved into stone. Grief, devotion, beauty, woven into a single shimmering monument that makes everything else nearby feel too loud. too heavy. You breathe in deeply. The air here feels softer, lighter, carrying the scent of jasmine and polished stone. And then one final shimmer brings you to a modern skyline. Towers of glass and steel rising like digital mountains. Bridges lit with LED. Ribbons. Museums shaped like shells, waves, and folded metal origami. People still build wonders. They just use different tools. You turn slowly in place. Ancient wonders fell. New ones rose. Some surpassed the originals. Some echoed them. Some stole directly from their playbook. Humans don't stop at loss. They respond to it. A warm gust flows through the air, nudging you forward once more. New wonders fade again into mist, leaving only the faint glow of excavation lights up ahead, bright, clinical, modern. Archaeology waits next. The world isn't done learning from the past. The glow ahead sharpens as you walk, no longer the soft gold of candles or moonlight, but a crisp, white radiance with a faint bluish tint. The kind of light that hums. The kind of light that makes shadows look clinical and lines look straighter than reality intended. You've stepped out of the eras of conquerors, builders, and gods, and into the era of people with clipboards. Archaeology. The ground under your feet shifts to something firm and leveled, a mixture of smooth gravel and carefully laid pathways. The soundscape changes too. Gone are the chants, cracks, waves, and roars. Now you hear beep, beep, shf, clink, murmur. Not chaotic but methodical. Tools brushing soil, pens tapping, cameras clicking, soft conversations in multiple languages, overlapping like broken fragments of pottery being pieced together. Ahead lies a dig site massive, layered, alive with focus. Floodlights illuminate trenches cut into the earth, their edges sharp and straight. Ropes divide the area into neat squares. Labeled tags flutter in the breeze. People move with slow, deliberate motions, as though afraid to disturb not just the dirt, but the memories beneath it. You step closer and stop at the edge of a rectangular pit where two archaeologists kneel. They brush soil from a stone surface, slow strokes, measured breaths. The stone reveals a carving, a lotus, faint but elegant. You recognize the style. Temple of Artemis. One fragment the centuries didn't fully claim. A mainstream historical fact whispers in. Some of the lost wonders like the mausoleum and the lighthouse were partially rediscovered or reconstructed from fragments found during centuries of excavations. Archaeology didn't just bring them back to light. It gave them second lives in museums, textbooks, virtual reconstructions, and imaginations. You crouch beside the dig, though no one notices you because you're walking through memory again. The archaeologists speak in muted tones, their words blending with the hum of floodlights. One lifts a shard of pottery. Another uncovers a mosaic tile. A third examines a broken column drum with freshly exposed fluting. You move on, stepping between trenches, careful not to disturb the delicate grids of string that mark each unit. Up ahead, a team works with ground-penetrating radar equipment, a long device gliding slowly across the earth. A screen, beside it, shows ghostly outlines. Walls, voids, foundations, structures unseen for centuries. You pause, watching as the screen blinks and the image of a possible chamber appears, faint but undeniable. You feel a strange thrill ripple through your chest. A quirky tidbit floats into your head. Archaeologists have found entire ancient neighborhoods by detecting variations in soil compactness, or by noticing crop patterns from aerial photographs. Sometimes nature itself points the way to things humans forgot. You continue walking, passing tables covered with artifacts, separated into trays, bones, glass beads, tools, bronze fragments, pieces of inscriptions. A small lamp illuminates a cracked piece of marble carved with Greek letters. You lean over it and trace the shapes with your eyes. They whisper stories that only half survived. Nearby, a reconstruction crew stands around a digital screen. You approach. On the screen, a 3D model spins slowly, a detailed reconstruction of the Colossus of Rhodes. But it's not just the standing legs over the harbour version. It's multiple iterations layered together. One more realistic placement near the harbour entrance, another based on medieval imagination, another reflecting recent engineering studies. Historians still argue whether such reconstructions should aim for strict accuracy or for interpretive education. You watch the models shift, flickering through possibilities. They don't compete. They complement. You drift to another station where a massive printer hums softly. It's creating a scaled physical model of the Lighthouse of Alexandria layer by layer, resin rising like a ghost rebuilding itself. A researcher carefully examines the model's outer casing, comparing it to historical drawings and new underwater survey maps. You walk on, noticing a trench that looks deeper than the others. A group of excavators stands inside it, illuminated by soft overhead lamps. They dig carefully around what appears to be a segment of wall, smooth, pale, faintly decorated. You step closer. The world flickers. In an instant, the ruins dissolve into a full structure, the wall rising tall, bright, decorated with vibrant colors. A courtyard hums around you. Priests chant. Visitors stroll. The building radiates life. Then another flicker. You're back at the excavation trench. This time, though, you see the structure twice. Once as ruins, once as memory. They overlap like a double exposure. Archaeology does that. It refuses to separate past from present. It weaves them together. You follow a narrow path to a quieter corner of the site, where a single archaeologist kneels near a shallow pit. They're brushing something small, delicate, fine. You step closer. It's a tiny carved figurine, a goddess maybe, or a nymph. The details are astonishing. Eyelids, hair strands, folds in the garment. The archaeologist lifts it gently, cradling it as though it might melt. You feel something shift inside, to you. Archaeology isn't destruction. It isn't erosion. It's the opposite. It's a gentle intervention, a negotiation between time and memory. It asks permission from the earth. It waits. It listens. You stand and let your gaze sweep across the entire dig site. Workers measure distances with string. Students sketch pottery shards. Researchers argue over the placement of a single brick. Surveyors scan the ground with lasers. Cameras flash. Brushes sweep. Pens scratch. Tools tap gently against stone. Nothing here is hurried. Nothing here is careless. This isn't about rebuilding the wonders exactly as they were. It's about understanding them. You turn toward the far edge of the site, where a narrow path leads away into the night. The lights fade behind you, and the air warms again. Far ahead, the shadows shift in strange patterns. You can hear faint murmurs, whispers, distant stories none spoken by living people. These aren't facts waiting to be measured. These are myths, legends. Half-truths and full dreams spinning around ruins like fireflies. You step toward them as the boundary between history and imagination begins to blur. The myths of the wonders are waiting, and they have opinions. The archaeological lights fade behind you as you step into a region where the air feels thicker, like walking into a dream someone else left running. It's not dark exactly, more like dusk, caught in a bottle and poured gently across the landscape. Shadows here don't behave strictly according to physics. They lean in, curl around your ankles, stretch wider or shorter without any logical reason. And the silence? It's not empty. It's attentive. This is the territory of myths. You move slowly, each footstep muffled by a soft ground that feels neither like soil nor stone, more like compressed memory. It gives just enough under your weight to feel alive. Ahead, small golden motes float in the air, drifting in slow spirals like curious sparks. They brighten whenever you draw close, as though greeting you. A faint whisper rides the stale breeze. Half words, half chants, fragments of stories people once told around fires or whispered in temples. Not facts, not archaeology. Something older, messier, more human. You step into an open clearing ringed by stone fragments that look suspiciously intentional, arranged in a circle, angled just slightly inward. Not quite a shrine, not quite a ruin, more like a meeting place for stories that outlived the structures they once belonged to. One of the floating motes darts toward a nearby block of stone, bursting into a flicker of light that shapes itself briefly into an image. A woman with long hair, holding a pot of water. You blink, and she dissolves. Then another mote flashes to life above a toppled column. This time it shows a man with a hammer and chisel raising them toward the sky, as though fending off something unseen. His image fades as well. You realize the motes are memories, not factual reconstructions, but the stories whispered around the wonders long after those wonders fell. Myths aren't concerned with accuracy. They care about meaning. A mainstream historical fact stirs in your mind. Large parts of what we I think we know about certain wonders, especially the Hanging Gardens, the Colossus, and even aspects of the lighthouse come from ancient writers who contradicted one another, exaggerated, added flair, or simply repeated third-hand tales. The Seven Wonders list itself wasn't fixed. It shifted depending on the author. You step farther into the clearing, the air quivers. Suddenly, the world flickers into an impossible version of Babylon, vast green terraces swirling with mist, waterfalls pouring from one tier to the next, far grander than any historian would confidently describe. Vines 20 feet long. Flowers glowing faintly in the dark. This isn't engineering. It's fantasy wearing Babylonian clothing. Ah, you whisper. The garden's PR team. The dreamscape dissolves almost immediately, swirling upward before collapsing like smoke. Another memory replaces it roads, but different. The Colossus stands astride the harbour, legs wide like a living gate, ships sailing between them. A scene every historical scholar today rolls their eyes at. Still, the myth refuses to die, because it's cooler this way. The giant looks down at you with glowing eyes. Then the vision pops like a bubble. Another moat shimmers to life, projecting an image of the lighthouse as a giant flaming sword stabbing upward into the heavens, its light visible from across the world, which is, physically impossible. But you admire the dramatic flair. A quirky tidbit floats through your mind. Medieval writers sometimes claimed the lighthouse had magical properties, including mirrors that could see approaching ships days before they arrived, or chambers that concentrated spiritual energy. None of it was true, but none of it died either. Stories cling like burrs. You move deeper into the myth field. The shadows thicken here, swirling around your legs like curious cats. The moats cluster ahead in a tight ring, almost like they're guarding something. You push forward, gently, and the moats burst upward, forming a canopy of shimmering images. You stand beneath a rain of stories. One shows the Temple of Artemis burning while the goddess herself lifts an infant Alexander the Great across a distant field. Another shows King Mausolus rising from his tomb every 100 years to inspect his city. Yet another shows the statue of Zeus speaking prophecies in a thunderous voice. You take them in quietly, resisting the urge to correct any of them. Facts have their place. Myths have theirs. Myths are emotional archaeology. They dig not through dirt, but through fear, longing, vanity, grief, awe. Historians still argue whether myths around vanished wonders preserve kernels of truth, or simply reflect the imagination of later cultures projecting their values backward. The academic debates get heated, but standing here, you see the answer plainly. Both are true. All myths are partially real, partially invented, but all are deeply human. You step beneath the canopy of swirling images, feeling a pleasant electricity tingling along your skin. The moats drift downward, orbiting you like slow, glowing fireflies. Each one flashes a different vision, some comforting, some unsettling, some downright ridiculous. You pause at a larger stone slab, half sunk into the ground. A faint carving flickers into view, an inscription you can't fully read. For a moment, you feel as if the stone is trying to finish its own story, to bridge the gap between what was and what people wanted to believe. The slab glows brighter, then fades. You breathe out slowly, feeling the atmosphere lighten. The moats rise and drift toward the dark, scattering like sparks blown from a dying fire. Your shoulders relax as the myths release you. Before you step out of the clearing, the world flickers once more, this time forming a fully realized illusion. All 7 wonders standing together at sunset, glowing, untouched, perfect. You know it's not real. You know it never happened. But the sight still tightens your chest in that way only beauty and longing can. You take in the final vision, letting your eyes trace each structure's silhouette. Then it dissolves, floating away on an invisible wind. The clearing dims, the myths settle back into silence, and ahead, a warm light waits steady, inviting, almost familiar. It's the light of the present. And the question that has waited for every step of this long journey. What endures? You step out of the myth-lit clearing and into a gentler landscape, as if the world itself is finally exhaling after holding its breath for 19 sections straight. The ground firms, the air clears, and a soft warmth settles around your shoulders, warm in that familiar, modern way, like sunlight slipping through a museum skylight onto polished floors. The path ahead feels less like a journey into the past and more like a walk towards something you already know, even if you haven't quite named it yet. No ruins, no embers, no tremors, no roiling seas, just a broad, calm stretch of land that feels startlingly ordinary. And somehow, that's more powerful than the dramatic scenes you've crossed, because what endures isn't always loud. You walk slowly, letting your steps echo in the hush. The scenery around you shifts in subtle layers. Dusty plains give way to tidy footpaths of crushed stone, then to wooden boardwalks arranged with museum-like precision. Soft spotlights flicker to life along the edges, illuminating small clusters of objects. Carved fragments, bronze tools, broken pottery, tiny figurines, bits of mosaics. No grand monuments. No towering statues, just pieces. But these pieces feel alive. You squat beside one of them, a chunk of marble with faint, barely there fluting. You run a finger along the groove. It might once have belonged to a column of the mausoleum or a secondary hall of Artemis's temple. Now it sits on display, tenderly arranged, carefully labeled in your mind, at least. A mainstream historical fact rises gently. The stories of the ancient wonders didn't survive because their structures did, but because people wrote about them, copied those writings, retold them, reinvented them. The wonders endured not in stone, but in memory, scribes preserving them, scholars debating them, poets embellishing them, travelers marveling at them long after the actual stones had disappeared. You stand and continue. Soon the path leads you to a wide open gallery. No walls, no ceiling, just night sky, cradling a curated collection of echoes. Pedestals rise from the ground, each holding something small but impossibly evocative. A replica of the lighthouse's mirror, a carved lion from the mausoleum's friezes, a handful of glazed bricks in the cobalt shade once seen on the Ishtar Gate, a tiny clay tablet listing temple offerings in Babylon. None of these items are colossal, none are grand, and yet they speak louder than any giant statue. You brush your fingertips over a brick glazed deep celestial blue, the kind of blue the ancient world perfected. It glimmers faintly under the ambient glow, stubbornly vibrant across millennia. You whisper, "Still here." And the brick seems to whisper back, "Of course." Further down the gallery, a small group of ghost-like figures appears. Tourists, students, families, travelers. They drift quietly, as respectful as museum-goers who just realize they're standing in front of something they don't fully understand yet. They snap photos. They tilt their heads. They lean in close to read plaques only they can see. You walk among them, unnoticed but not alone. A quirky tidbit enters your thoughts. One of the earliest travel influencers of the ancient world, Antipater of Sidon, helped popularize the Seven Wonders by writing a poem about them, effectively creating the world's first top 7 list. People loved lists then just as much as they do now. And his list? It survived. His poetry became our guide. Your steps carry you toward the center of the open space, where a single structure rises, not ancient, but familiar. A museum facade, clean and modern, flickering with soft indoor lighting. Its doors drift open soundlessly. You enter. Inside, the galleries aren't physical, they're conceptual. Memory exhibits float like lanterns suspended in midair, one showing the Great Pyramid glowing under the sun, another showing the Colossus reconstructed in bronze, another capturing the mausoleum's tiered roof, another shimmering with imagined gardens of Babylon. Each one rotates slowly, offering every angle: historical, speculative, mythical, emotional. Historians still argue whether these reconstructions are accurate or fanciful, whether they honor or distort the truth. But as you walk among the floating visions, you understand something deeper. Accuracy is only one kind of truth. What people choose to remember, what they carry forward, is another. A warm wind sweeps through the gallery, not natural wind, but something symbolic. It brushes past your cheek, carrying stories, names, half-known legends, half-forgotten timelines. You close your eyes and let it wash over you. The ancient wonders, every one of them may have crumbled, burned, toppled, drowned, or been chiseled into someone's medieval wall, but they survived anyway. In the words spoken about them, in the art inspired by them, in the myths that clung to them, in the imaginations of people who never saw them but swore they could picture them perfectly. In you open your eyes. The museum dissolves softly into darkness, replaced once more by the open night sky. A breeze brushes your skin, carrying the faintest scent of sand, salt, stone, and incense the four smells that now define your long journey. You breathe in deeply. Ahead, the landscape dims to a soft, velvety blur. Your footsteps slow, your shoulders loosen. Even the air lowers its voice. Your journey is almost over, and the world is ready to let you rest. The ground beneath your feet softens as you step into a gentler darkness, the path dissolving into something warm and forgiving, like the earth has turned into memory foam just for you. The air slows too, each breeze longer, calmer, more deliberate, as though the night is carefully smoothing out the last sharp edges of the world before you drift off. You pause, letting your breath settle. Everything you've seen, the deserts, the temples, the gardens, the storms, the seas, the ruins, they all pull back now, shrinking into distant silhouettes on the horizon of your mind. Not gone, just quieter, softer, folded neatly into the shelves of your imagination where they can rest undisturbed. A faint glow arcs across the sky, not as bright as moonlight, not as scattered as starlight, something in between. A gentle haze, a comforting shimmer. It stretches overhead like a blanket being drawn slowly across the heavens, tucking everything in. Your steps become slower, lighter, almost floating. Even the sounds around you begin to blur, the whisper of wind fading into the low hum of night, the soft echo of your footsteps dissolving into silence. It all blends into one continuous, soothing breath. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. You feel a warmth blooming across your chest, as if all the stories you've gathered are settling into place, becoming part of you in a way words can't fully express. The ancient world feels far away now, wrapped in its own quiet sleep, and you feel the present gently nudging you to rest with it. So, let your shoulders drop, let your jaw unclench, let your eyelids grow just a little heavier. You've walked a long way tonight. You've seen more than most will ever imagine. And now, it's time to drift. Time to let the wonders rest. And you with them.